Yep, it's 7
Yeah,
o'clock
it's
by
7 o'clock.
Verizon.
Yeah. I want to call the September the 16th, 2021 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order. We'll start out with the approval of the agenda. Staff recommends approval of the agenda as submitted. Is that correct, Mark?
Move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes for the August 19th, 2021 meeting. Any changes or corrections there? Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I want to, before we move on to the other items on the agenda here, I want to comment that please, everybody who intends to speak tonight, other than the applicants, will you please fill out a blue card that you can get from Mr. Shipley to let us know what item you're going to speak on tonight. And the items that are on the agenda, you'll be called when that item is being discussed. If the item is not on the agenda, we'll get to you when we get to the part on questions and comments from the community. But if you are to speak with an item on the agenda, you will be called at that time. Excuse me. But please do fill out a card so we know. Discussion, item number 3, discussion and public hearing on a final plat for Brookmere Phase 3, parcel 054, tax map 152, 34.67 acres, 52 lots, zoned R-1 OSR, Ryan Lynch applicant.
Yes, this is the next phase of Brookmere subdivision off of Birchie Road. This originally was submitted to finish out Brookmere, but they're submitting it as a Phase 3, and they're basically just going to the Colonial Gas Line easement and to the north of that. The area south of that toward Kingsgate will be platted in the next phase, Phase 4. And this is basically what the area looks like. This is the part that backs up to Sugarwood to the east and to the north. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the part to the very south will be the next phase. As with any final plat, as you all know, one of the things that we do at the staff level is do a field review to see what kind of condition the site's in before it's presented to you for a vote. And we put together a few months ago a checklist that I've circulated at your all's places. And that's one that we filled out for this project. Basically we put that together mainly to help the staff make sure we didn't forget things. When we kind of collectively try to go out from different perspectives at the same time and look at these sites to make sure we're all on the same page. So a couple of days ago, we went out and did a kind of a pre-meeting review of the site, and it was pretty, there's a lot of work to do. These are some of the pictures that we took 2 days ago. One of the things that we noticed, there's quite a bit of dirt that was piled up against these sugar maple trees back against Sugarwood, so we needed to get that pulled away from there. And then there's some branches that need to be pruned off at the branch collar that have been damaged. Some other, and these are 2 days ago slides. Like I said, this is an end wall on the north end toward Sugarwood. This is the slope that backs up against Sugarwood, the drainage area against Sugarwood subdivision. This is kind of in the middle top part of the development. You can see it was pretty rough condition. Some of the curb had not been backfilled. I think that's my foot in that picture. So, and then on the south end, facing the Colonial Gas Line easement, there was some areas that were unstable. That's kind of what they look like. They've been working a lot in the past couple of days since that time. And this is a drainage swell that is basically at the toe of the slope back towards Sugarwood. You got the buffer strip that backs up to Sugarwood is on top of the hill, and it comes down into this drainage swell. And that's what the drainage easement on the plat is for. Obviously, that's going to need a lot of attention. Some more pictures. This is the drainage swell. Another in-wall area. Then around the sanitary sewer manhole. These pictures here were taken later this afternoon. And so you can see that they're demonstrating that they're trying to make progress on the items. So the traffic signs have been installed. This is kind of a temporary installation. They're going to have to be redone. Ultimately, they'll have to be approved by the Public Works Director. And then some other work. They've added some more hydroseeding. It looks like they've maybe moved the field dirt off of the maple trees. Then that in-wall treatment, I don't know whether they've dressed the soil, but they've covered it with straw. It looks like they've cleaned it out, and they've hydroseeded quite a few more areas. Looks like they've done some additional grading in those areas as well. This is kind of a staging area up at the top of the hill. So based on what we saw later this afternoon, the town engineer had sent an email out to the applicant. And basically, the feeling is that the items that are certainly related to public health and safety absolutely have to be completed immediately. We obviously can't sign the final plat until we're confident that the site is safe for anybody that may be out there. So like the curbs getting properly backfilled, no other issues that would be an apparent hazard for the public, like some asphalt that had been cut in front of a catch basin. There was a photograph of that earlier. That all that stuff needs to be fixed. The other items that need to be completed, which is mostly what's in that punch list, do need to be taken care of as soon as possible. And what the town engineer had mentioned is if those items can't be completed satisfactorily prior to requesting him to sign the plat, that we're going to ask that they provide a 3-month letter of credit for completion for $100,000. And so that kind of, incentivizes trying to get these remaining kind of loose ends taken care of that are not safety related, but that do need immediate attention. So with that, I think in terms of the field items, that's the staff's perspective on that. The other items that were related to the plat, there were 8 other items. There's the staff punch list, which I just talked about, and then 8 other items that we would recommend approval for in terms of the plat itself. So really, ultimately, it's up to you all as to whether you feel the site is at a stage of completion or there's an assurance of completion for you all to feel comfortable, approving the plat with those subject tos, and one of those, of course, is to complete the staff's punch list. That's up to you. I wanted to provide you all with kind of a visual of what we see when we go out and do these site inspections. We're going to talk internally, I think, a lot about how to deal with this a little bit differently maybe in the future, as it always puts everybody in a little bit of an awkward position. We're not trying to hold up anybody, but it's never our objective. But we also, when we go out and see the things that we saw 2 days ago at least, it was pretty apparent to us that it just wasn't ready at that time. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Mark, your statement here, depending on the progress, it may be better to plat the entire remainder of the subdivision for consideration in October. You're talking about the final everything.
Well, that was that was assuming that this wouldn't get acted on this month. So, and that's really up to you all as to whether you want to act on it this phase 3. My assumption is they'll be submitting for phase 4 probably for October. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So the deadline's Monday, just to remember that. So that's what that statement was about. If that's not applicable, then it's basically the 9 subject twos that were below that.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments for Mark right now? Then we'll get the applicant.
Thank you. My name is Russ Rackley, Rackley Engineering, P.O. Box 30456, Knoxville 37930. Here representing Homestead Land Holdings, who is the developer of this subdivision. We had an impromptu meeting. Me and Brian Money with Saddlebrook actually showed up to Mark's office this morning, and he was at 11, and got the items that he had emailed last night that he was going to recommend postponement, because to date we didn't have any punch list or anything that staff was objecting to, and from 11 o'clock until 4 o'clock, which was the send pictures deadline, we remedied all of those items to the best of our ability to get it. And most of those items there were a couple of catch basins that were too high area drains. That's what the one picture with the fresh mortar. It had an extra 2-foot riser on it that needed to be taken off. So those pictures are showing that we've lowered it. We can't backfill it until tomorrow to let that mortar dry around the top of that area drain. And the slope back and the riprap that he pointed out, we pulled the riprap out, put the fabric underneath it, and put the riprap back in to clean up that outlet protection. The slopes that they were complaining about was that the topsoil was lumpy or chunky, and so we tracked it to with a track bulldozer to break up some of those clods and re-stabilized it. The whole site has been hydroseeded. We do need some rain. I know we got a lot of rain a couple of weeks ago, but that was prior to us hydroseeding, and we've not had much rain since. And as my discussions with the town engineer earlier today is that the $120,000 letter of credit is literally titled erosion control and site stabilization. So I think he conferred that the town is secured that there will be grass growing there because they have plenty of money to regrass the site if something were to happen inexplicably to the developer. A couple of the other items regarding signage, he mentioned it was temporary. The rest of the neighborhood is ornamental signpost, decorative signpost instead of the standard. All those have been on order for the last 9 weeks. They're still 6 weeks out. We're running into a lot of problems that a lot of people are seeing with materials along with labor, which is why, quite frankly, we've shut down 2 projects in Knox County to move the contractors' crews over here to try to finish this one to get it done enough to get approved, this month. And so we're struggling around with both labor and materials. But when I go through the 12 items construction prerequisite to final approval in Article 5 of Appendix B of the Town of Farragut Code of Ordinances, we've achieved that. It's not as pretty or as perfect as what we normally like to do, but we've achieved, as Darrell Smith, your town engineer, said in his email earlier, the significantly have completed the life safety and health components of creating real property. In other words, are the roads there? Is the water there? Is the sewer there? Is the storm drainage there? Yes, 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 and yes. All those items are in place. So we would ask And one of the items of the conditions of approval is the town punch list, which we just received an hour or two ago, a couple hours ago, from the town engineer, which is a little bit of a deficiency for us not having an opportunity to go through it. And as I spoke with Mr. Smoke prior to the meeting, that we need to get a little bit better process moving forward on more frequent reviews. And part of the problem is, even with town inspectors and with myself and with the Saddlebrook and Homestead field crew, we're out there quite frequently, and sometimes we don't acknowledge things. We don't recognize things because we're seeing it every day, as opposed to having the value of having the town staff come out and take a look, maybe more than 2 days before the planning commission meeting, but a little bit earlier than that. The long and the short of it is that everything that they showed us at 11 o'clock this morning, those aren't 30-day corrections. Those are 48-hour corrections. We've got the most of them completed in 4 hours. So I would respectfully ask for approval tonight, and per Daryl's email, we are willing to, with a list in hand, not ask for his sign-off and signature until those significant items are completed. There are some remaining items that are always within your own ordinances a prerequisite to release of maintenance bonds or completion bonds, which we have those in place, and we have those amounts and more coming for the final surface and for the sidewalks such as that. And those items are, like on any project, are ongoing items that get addressed throughout the process of home construction. But we're more than happy to accept that we won't ask for him to sign it until these significant items are addressed. And the reason being is that they'll be addressed by, at the latest, Monday morning at 8 a.m., and we can't even get all the utility signatures by then. So it usually takes about half a week to a week just to get all the other signatures before we ever come back to the town. And this list of items that he sent us at about 3:45 this afternoon aren't significant. They're not 30-day items to complete. We have our full attention on this to get it completed and get move forward. The reason why we're excluding the south side of the petroleum pipeline, the Colonial easement, is we ran into some difficulties with both KUB and Colonial crossing the line, some KUB gas work coming off of Kingsgate to tie in, put us behind a little bit on that. Our goal was to, and as we've worked in the staff developer meeting and since with Dan Johnson, was to not try to plat more lots without a connection to Kingsgate, because we knew how important that was to the town. Right now, that connection is under base stone, is compacted, is traversable by a fire truck. And Dan had mentioned that he's okay with that, knowing that we're still actively over there working. Ideally, by the end of the day tomorrow, I actually have binder on it. Weather depending, we all saw the wind and the dark clouds when we walked in here. But that was our goal, was to, even though we're not platting that south section, to still have the vehicular access to Kingsgate that was a requirement of the original concept plan approval. And we've achieved that from an emergency standpoint, as far as a fire truck can drive across that base stone. It is rolled in and compacted, and will support a fire truck if necessary until we get that we get binder down on that section. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but we're okay with the 9 items, one of which is to complete the punch list, and the email that Daryl sent this afternoon at 5 p.m. He lists some major items that he wanted completed prior to him sign or us post a 3-month letter of credit. And I think my discussion with him earlier, and Mark, we can certainly clarify with him but there are some items that are more minor in nature that would fall under a maintenance letter of credit that y'all already have required, and that's already in the works to be delivered to the town. But with that, I'd respectfully ask for approval tonight, subject to the 9 conditions from staff's comments.
Clarify that the town engineer's email actually says if the above items cannot be completed satisfactorily, that by the time he's requested to sign the final plat, there would be the 3-month letter of credit for
Right.
100,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have one comment, Russ, and it doesn't relate specifically to this plat that you're requesting for tonight, though. I know the residents of Kingsgate would like to see those 2 mounds of gravel right there on Kingsgate and the cut-through moved out as soon as possible, and they would appreciate to have that work done as soon as possible, because there's been a lot of 3, 4, 5 construction trucks up there kind of blocking that road.
We would like to have it done as
Oh,
well.
I bet you would.
That gravel, we had to we had to relay a sewer service to the house there that the easement is on, because the existing sewer service was running under the new town access easement. And that it's a private side of the line, and we didn't want to put the burden on him if he ever had a problem with the sewer to have to dig up the town road. So that gravel was to backfill that, and it should have been already done. Oh, okay, we're pouring him a new concrete driveway, so that's what that's for. But no, we definitely want it done. So, I know when I was out there, when I was on that end of the project 2 days ago, there was a pile of gravel to backfill the sewer line. So I haven't been up on that side of the project today.
I've had a request from the residents in Kingsgate to have a chat with your drivers as far as that deliver up in that area to adhere to the speed limit, please.
Okay, certainly.
That's kids and older people walking dogs. That's kind of a big deal to them.
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. I'll definitely put the word out.
Okay.
Mark, can you give me clarity? We're talking about a potential need for a letter of credit. Can you please review that with me again, what that is?
Well,
I know we have some in the subject twos, but is there an additional one we're talking about?
the way I read this is probably needs to be clarified with the town engineer, because it's his letter, his email, that basically all the items need to be completed. Now, he would not sign the final plat until the safety-related items are taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And if the other items that aren't safety-related aren't taken care of, then the letter of credit would be required for him to be able to sign the plat.
So what I'm asking is, does that need to be in our subject twos?
It probably should be, actually, yeah. I mean, you could say that falls under the punch list, but that would probably be more clear to have that in there.
How do I put that?
The thing was the 3-month letter of credit for completion, just general completion. And that one's got a short time frame intentionally, so that we can make sure that the items that aren't complete right now will be taken care of in a very short period of time. The other letters of credit that we have are much longer in duration than that. So that was the logic of where he was coming from
Okay,
with that.
so the 10th should say 3-month letter of credit for general completion of,
Non-safety related items on staff's punch list, yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
talking with this phase.
Yes.
Yeah.
If not complete, prior to asking him to sign. I think we can have everything addressed by middle of next week, before we have all the other signatures from all the other agencies, before we bring it to y'all.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Commissioner Green, I have a couple of comments. I guess I'm a little bit puzzled on the process. There's this punch list here that I have in my hand, which is, I think, the
Yep.
one you're talking about
Yep.
the items that are on here. Is that available to you? Was that available to you prior, weeks ago or months ago?
No.
I don't mean with it filled out, I just mean the blank.
Well, here's the process, the way it's supposed to work.
Okay.
It maybe didn't in this case, but the way it's going to work from this day forward is We've given them a checklist on the Grove over there on Boyd Station Road, this checklist, so that the grading contractor knows before he starts working what we expect. That's the intention of it. They didn't get it on this one because the checklist is relatively recent.
Because it sounds like the town is doing your quality control over there, but if you have this, you know what to expect.
Yeah, I'll be honest,
Get that cleaned up beforehand, makes the whole process easier for you.
That's
And
right.
it takes the town out of being the last guy to look
That
at.
checklist is relatively new, but we are issuing that when we issue grading permits.
You sent one that Mr. Smoke later said was sent to me by mistake from the town as a punch list on the preserve. There was nothing provided here, and that punch list isn't in any of your record documents, ordinances, or
The
regulations.
preserve in this project predated
Right.
that, so I'm saying
I
going
am all
forward,
for
the
moving
Grove,
forward.
you
a
have
more
a punch
clear
list for
process.
the Grove. You have it right now, because we personally gave it to you,
I'm
so
really looking.
that won't be an
future here. I'm
excuse.
trying to figure out
email
what
at-
broke here. Something broke because.
Be
you know,
clear,
A few
at-
days before you're ready to
Yeah, that's,
submit the final plat, there's a whole bunch of stuff.
You're
that's
exactly
not done.
right, that's the way it's
So-
supposed to work.
Right.
That kind of clarifies
I'm,
that.
I'm all for a better process moving forward. We
Yeah.
were given that
We are
punch
too.
list.
Yeah,
We were given that punch list in Daryl's email at 5 o'clock today. And had Brian Money and I not impromptu walked down to see if Mark was available at 11 o'clock, we would be standing here right now not knowing what the issues or concerns were on recommended postponing 30 days for items that aren't 30 days to fix. And that's my thing. I've been down here a lot. I'm not looking for special treatment. If I would not be standing before you if there was 30 or 45 days worth of work to get this thing buttoned down, but it's not. We're talking a matter of days to get these items addressed and to move forward. And I spoke with Mr. Smoke before the meeting. We actually called a meeting with staff a month ago after the preserve to talk about the process, to talk about letters of credit, about the completion requirements in the subdivision regulations, and if y'all want to require more than what's enumerated there, you need to revise the subdivision regulations, et cetera, and to talk about the letter of credit process. We're all for making this much more streamlined and much more clear for everybody involved, not just us, but the other developers that choose to do work in the town of Farragut. But all that being said, we are, from a creation of real property, the roads are in place minus the surface, which is normal to bond the surface. The sidewalks are bonded because we build them as we build the houses, otherwise you just rebuild them again. The regulatory stop signs are there, although not the final version. There's stop signs and street names for emergency vehicles, all drivers know to stop. All the water, sewer, electric, communication, all that's in ground. The curbs are 80% of the curbs are backfilled, if not 100. They were working on them again this afternoon to backfill curbs. Over 80% of the site's been hydro-seeded. We blew straw and seeded the remainder of the site, and the areas that we had to get in to correct the items we found out at 11 today were the sticking points for the town of Farragut. So I'm not trying to get in an argument, but I'm trying to say that we need to revise the process to get to this point. We have to submit a plat 30 days before. In my position, as Mark and I agree all the time, that 30 days submittal prior to the meeting, if we wait until we're 100% complete, 100%, absolutely 110% complete, then we're literally sitting, twiddling our thumbs for 30 days, waiting on the meeting to come up. And that's really not fair to anybody. And I know, I like to think in my mind that we do, if not better, at least as good of a job as anybody else in East Tennessee in development. But I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for a more clear process moving forward so that we can do our projections and Brian can do his projections. I mean, right now we have a 10-person waiting list to sign contracts, and we don't have any lots left in phase 1 or 2. So we need these lots, and so we've literally shut down other projects in other part of the county to move what men and materials we had over to here to finish, just because of the labor shortages and the material issues that we're running into right now, which is a bigger systemic problem than Homestead or town of Farragut. is pretty much nationwide at this point, so. But with that, I just respectfully ask for approval, subject to the non-comments plus 10, which would be the town engineer's email, either completed or put forth the letter of credit.
Russ, I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. You've kind of been the whipping dog a little bit tonight, and I may add to that.
Yeah. bring it.
At the preserve, I went to bat for you guys.
Yes.
And you were further along than this. I mean, and I'm telling you, I've been involved either directly or indirectly with the town for nearly 30 years, and we've never approved a final plat with field conditions that look like this. So I guess to give a little bit of defense to the town staff, this checklist, I mean, how many developments have you been directly involved with in the town of Farragut? The checklist may have been formalized in this process, but the checklist is not new. You know what the town's expectations are. And I told you I was going to pick on you.
Yeah.
And I'm putting you on the spot.
I've never, prior to the preserve, I've never seen that.
Irrespective of having a formalized checklist, you know what the town's expectations are to have a final plat approved.
I know what their expectations are, you're right, and I know what their regulations require, Noah, which are two different things.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, back in the day, it wasn't too many years ago, that if you weren't completely stabilized with a stand of grass, you wouldn't. And then over the years, we've kind of relaxed it. And I've been an advocate
Yes.
on the development side of the community. Hey, let's get these lots platted. Let's get construction going on in the town of Farragut. Let's get new residents in the town of Farragut. And you guys have been a great part of that. But I can't advocate when you're not there. I mean, you've got. I'm not saying you've got serious deficiencies with this project, and I don't know if they're 10 days or 30 days, but in my experience with the town, we've never approved a plat with field conditions that look like this. Now, I'm sure these are the worst of the worst conditions in your whole site, and the town of Farragut's going to go through and pick the stuff that's so far out of compliance, and that's what I'm seeing here. I didn't drive your site today, but I've looked at your site. But the reality is, you guys, as many years as you've worked in the town of Farragut, you know what the expectations are. There's nothing new. If anything, we've relaxed them. Just like I went to bat at the preserve over on Turkey Creek, I went to bat. I said, hey, they're there. They've made good strides. That they have the intent to get this thing done. They've got a good track record in the town. They want to have a good relationship with the town. But I can't do that with that tonight. And I'm just one person on the planning commission. But you're not there.
I would say this, what does the preserve look like today?
Well, I mean, it seems like you've made pretty good progress. It's a heck of a lot further along than this. I mean, to me, it looks. Now, I've not been in the preserve in a while, so for all I know, you've already started some houses in there.
Oh, yeah.
You're eligible to start houses,
Yeah.
and so and the preserve, at least from seeing it from the Turkey Creek, looks good.
I don't-
But the preserve, when we approved the preserve, and I can't remember, it was earlier this summer. The preserve was way further along than what we're seeing here, and we can, blame the rain or the lack of rain, or if you get rain, you can't put down concrete, or if you don't get rain, the grass doesn't grow. It sucks. It does. But the reality is we can't start changing the rules. I understand that you've got folks lined up. Believe me, and we want what you guys are doing. We want your residents. I mean, the town had, I think I read in the paper today, 900 new residents in the last census, and you guys have been a big part of that. But you've got to be held to a standard that's consistent with what you've been held to in the past and what other folks are held to. I told you I was going to pick on you, Russ.
That's fine.
You may run me over when I get out to the parking lot, but I mean,
No.
I've known you for a long time.
Why would I do that?
But I'm just telling you.
No, I'm going back
but
to-
I feel like that we gave you an inch with the preserve, and now you're trying to take
No.
a yard.
But the 5 or 6 items he's shown are riprap outlet protection, one area drain that was too tall, and 2 slopes that were they said too chunky of topsoil.
I saw a manhole that looked like it was a foot below the top of curb.
Well, that section of curb hadn't been backfilled yet, so the manhole hadn't been raised. The donuts are on site. That's a half a day of work.
I know, but the reality is there's
Well,
expectations
well,
that the
that's
town
fine.
has always had, and they're not new expectations.
Well, and
they
that's
may have
fine.
been formalized in a checklist, which is new, but the expectations are still the same.
I
They're really
get
just
that.
trying to make it easier for you.
Well, and that'd be
Quite
great.
frankly, for the town going out this week, they're trying to get you the benefit of as much time to complete the field items as possible. So you kind of, and believe me, I've had my differences with the town staff over
Well,
30 years.
I
But I'm
understand.
telling you, you're throwing them under the bus by saying, hey, guys, you're giving me all this stuff at the 11th hour. The reality is they're giving you as much time all the way up to the meeting as possible to give you the benefit of the doubt. And now you're throwing them under the bus. It's not
I'm
fair.
not throwing them under the bus. I'm just saying that the process, we have a staff developer meeting 2.5 weeks before this meeting, which is where we get comments, and all those comments are technical related to the final plat, which is what you are voting on tonight.
That's right.
And that everything else has just been, well, in the
The
past,
final
it was
plat has always
how much
been-
grass is growing.
That final plat has
It's
always been
how
subject
much
to
grass is growing.
verification of completion of the field
Right.
items.
But what I'm pointing out is that in your own regulations right here, Article 4, development prerequisite to final approval, it lists 12 items. Monuments, that's corner pins. Grading, that's all the grading. Storm drainage, that's all the storm drainage. Roadway improvements. Sidewalk construction, we always bond that out, that's not a big deal. Installation of utilities, water supply system, sanitary sewers, erosion control, street name and traffic signs, 2-year maintenance bond, public road drainage maintenance bond. Those things are complete. The site of the 20 acres in this phase is almost entirely backfilled, Noah. They took pictures
Russ,
of the
I think
area
you're-
where
I
we
think you're
terminated.
substantially complete. I don't think you're there. I mean, we talked about the manhole below the curb.
Right.
But the reality is, here we are approving the plat, and it's not done yet.
Here's what the subdivision
I don't-
regulations
I don't-
say about guaranteeing in lieu of completed improvements. No final subdivision plat shall be approved by the planning commission or accepted for recording until the required improvements listed or agreed upon are constructed in a satisfactory manner. That satisfactory is determined by the town, not by you.
But you got to read the next sentence. In lieu of completed improvements, the planning commission on behalf of the town of Farragut may accept.
May
Yeah.
accept. You don't have to. If the planning commission's not comfortable and they don't feel you're up to the standard, then they don't have to accept a bond for what's left. Now, if they want to, that's up to them. But it doesn't say they shall. It says they may. They may consider it, but they don't have to.
I think you're too far off on your stabilization. I mean, other than some of the other items, which I know, obviously the donuts are easy, and moving a little this, a little there, moving some riprap and putting some erosion mat down. But, I mean, your stabilization's way off of what we've ever
The whole
approved.
site is hydro seeded. All we need is rain and it'll pop. You're wanting me to wait 30 days.
Well, you know what you've done in the past, prior to this? You put a water truck on it and you threw water on it. You got that. Even if you throw
and
some
and
rye on
be
it, it'll
dead-
come
And
up.
it'll be dead next week.
But you would, but what you've had to do in the past is the same thing. I mean, you've had to
But
throw.
what-
I've seen you put water trucks on it.
But
you know,
what
to
good
be able
is
to
it?
stabilize.
Yeah, to make y'all happy and get a plat recorded, and a week later it's dead. Because once you start watering it, it's counting on that water. If you let it water naturally from the rain, it will germinate and grow at a rate that the natural rainfall will sustain it. So yeah, I could go juice that up with all kinds of chemicals and turn it green to get it recorded, and then all be dead next week.
And that's what
That's
what
not
you've
what we're
done in the
looking for.
past. I mean, you're
Yeah.
saying that's because I'm telling you, your sites were stabilized in the past.
Brian Money, 122 Perimeter Park Road. All right, go.
There is no go. There's no. I mean, I think you kind of understand. The reality is
You
that
did
we
not
can't-
go by
we
the
can't-
site today.
No,
and
I didn't
want to
drive
tell
by the
you,
site,
I
but
want
I
to
tell
tell you
you, my
something, Noah.
staff, the staff that works for the town of Farragut, works for all the taxpayers in the town, has gone by the site.
I've been here twice a day
and
talking
we've
to your
and
friends.
we've never approved a site with the stabilization and the lack of field items that you guys have. And I'm the.
That's
you
a
can ask
lie.
us, I'm
You
the
haven't
guy-
been there today. That's a lie.
What the lies? What
That
we've
we
never
are not
approved?
stabilized. Yes. Have you been there? You're looking at pictures. Go out there before you guys go to this meeting every time. When we find at the last minute that we need to do things to get this approved, we jump. We have been out there doing everything. Mark, you know my effort today. I was here twice to your office. I have mud all over me. I shoveled myself. When we got notice that these were problems, we jumped. And Noah, the hydroseed is classified as stabilization. I'm sorry it hasn't rained for 2.5 weeks. This is not a deficient site. It's not significantly completed. The site is done under standards of your own regulations, and that's what we're trying to play by. And I understand that it's been better in the past. I do. And we've done things. like spraying water all over during a drought to get some grass to pop up in there. And I tried to take pictures of the clover, the earliest germination of some of these hydro seedings like this. I respect your opinion, but I've been out there in my own boots spreading hay today. It's done, and there's nothing I'm going to do tomorrow other than the items that Daryl told us to get done, because it is done. Let it rain. It's done. And what Daryl wants done, the town engineer, before he signs the plat, do not sign it until it is all done. I respect your opinion very, very, very much, Noah. Grown up watching you
My
develop.
opinion has to do with consistency and fairness.
Yes,
And consistency with what we've done in the past, and fairness with how we enforce our regulations.
understood.
And when the previous mayor asked me to serve on this commission, and who's now passed away, he said, "What's important to you?" I said, "Fairness and consistency." And I said, what we need to do and to prepare the town's reputation is, if we're going to have a set of rules, and I know our rules are tough, and we have a lot of developers that won't even set foot in the town of Farragut because our rules are tough. And that's okay. I think, generally speaking, we get a higher quality product in the town of Farragut than you do anywhere else in East Tennessee. And I support those rules. But the reality is that we have to be consistent in the application and the how we enforce our rules. And the reality is, this is not consistent with what we've done in the past and what our expectations are. And whether or not you have a checklist, you guys you've developed so many lots in the town of Farragut and so many subdivisions. You know what the town's expectations are.
Would you,
These
other
are
than the
not
grass,
surprises.
other than the grass, would you mind going through the items that need to be done, and let me address them, because I was on site all
I mean,
day.
you guys know that
No,
if
but
you
the
have,
things
if you
you're
have a
looking at are
manhole, if
different.
you have a manhole that's 12 inches below the top of curb, well, that's a problem.
Yeah, needs are.
And so, so you guys got to remedy that.
Would you mind putting that in the conditions to signing the plat? If
What-
that's the only, and go on to the next one, because I'm pretty sure we've gotten it all covered. I know you're picking on that one.
I think you guys have done a great job. Obviously, I'm not going to pick on this photograph here. I can see that you guys are trying to adjust the height. So
No,
by
I
the
already-
time
I took it like
by
this
the
so you
time
could
you
see.
guys got houses built on those lots, hopefully the area drains will work appropriately. But the reality is that what we're trying to do is be consistent with what our expectations have been with you guys in the past, and with any other developers who are developing subdivisions. Is, hey, these are the town's expectations, and we expect you to, and quite frankly, we've given you a lot of grace. And I personally went to bat on the Turkey Creek development, the preserve, the little subdivision over there, called the preserve something. And I said, hey, they're there. Let's get it. And we got you guys a final plat on that. But that's apples and oranges with what we're seeing here.
I'm
Yeah,
willing to talk specifics. Any single item that's not done, I think that you owe it to me, because of your strong opinion, to tell me which specific items. Is that thing backfilled, seeded and strawed that you're looking at on your screen? Yes. I wanted to show Mark pictures of it in process.
Well,
It
I
is
think
already
we'll have to-
backfilled, the area drain.
I mean, we have the punch list as a condition item, and we'll have to, to my knowledge, I
Too
don't know
much.
if all the staff has been out to look at what progress has been made. I personally haven't been, so I think the punch list is the comprehensive review of the field items, and all those things from our perspective have to be satisfactorily completed. That's the language in the subdivision regulation before the town engineer and the secretary of the planning commission should sign the plat. So,
Can I just want to say one thing. The concern, my concern is, and I've heard expressed at staff, is if we approve this and those field items aren't done to the satisfaction of the town engineer, he feels forced or pressured to sign off because we've signed off. That is my only concern, is that we're not putting the staff in an awkward position of having to approve something they don't feel comfortable that it's in a satisfactory condition, as the word.
And I understand that, but as I told Daryl today, I have faith in Daryl, and being a licensed engineer, that just like me, that we have an obligation beyond our employer. We have an obligation to the people of the state of Tennessee. So if he has provided a list, it's real easy. The list is either checked off or it's not, and if it's not, he doesn't sign. My only point here is we don't have 30 days of corrective work to check off that list. Literally by Monday, it'll be done.
disagree.
They're not massive. And so it seems somewhat, for us or anybody coming to the town, when you have a 30 or 45-day submittal prior to the meeting and all that, to penalize them an additional 30 days for 3 or 4 days worth of field work does not seem like the right thing to do. I have faith in Daryl that he's given us a list. It's not about his opinion, it's about the list. Fix this, fix this, fix this, fix this. Okay. Once he comes out and can check those off that they're done, then we're good. So, and if we're not, if it takes us 60 days to fix that list, then he doesn't sign it for 60 days. But it gets us past the step of this body approving essentially the technical document with the conditions of satisfying the punch list from the town engineering department. And I apologize, Noah, if you thought I was throwing Mark and staff under the bus. I mean, me and Mark, we have our talks, but at the same time, he knows that we respect one another. I was addressing the commissioner's comment about you've been provided this list, and moving forward, yes, he's going to provide the list at permit, but to date, they haven't provided the list at permit. So I was just trying to clarify. So I apologize. I was not in any way throwing Daryl. I have a lot of respect for Daryl and Mark.
I think you were frustrated that, and you mentioned multiple times at what time of the day you received the list. And
Well,
so
I
your
think
frustration came out very
yes.
easily that you didn't get the list until the 11th hour.
Well, and what I talked with David Smoke about before the meeting was that the day before the Tuesday staff developer meeting, staff should go out and put a list together. And you have until 2 days before the meeting to accomplish these major life safety and health items. And that's the other thing. There's an aesthetic component which really doesn't have anything to do with approving a plat. It's about whether or not the town has the financial security to maintain a stable site, because if you have to cash in our letter of credit, that means the bank is foreclosed on the property and is auctioned it off to the highest bidder. You or somebody else is going to come in and buy them at an 80% discount, and then it's going to be, you're going to come in and clean it up and sell them and do whatever. So it's understanding that process and making sure the town is in a secure position and not be on the hook financially to do something like providing water, sewer, storm drainage, or roads for this real property that's created from you signing the plat. So there's the functional component and there's the aesthetic component, right? And so what Daryl was saying in his email is his only functional component before he signs is backfilling all the curbs, which would include raising that one manhole, that sewer manhole that was 6 inches low. The rest of the items either need to be completed or post a 3-month, $100,000 letter of credit to the town to go ahead and have him sign, or we complete all the rest of the items before he signs. And so I think he's comfortable that the town, with all the other letters of credit, in other words, you still have your erosion control and stabilization letter of credit for $120,000. That's another letter of credit.
Yeah.
That's $67,000. Sidewalks is another $60,000.
I know our
So-
bar is high. I guess what
I'm
I'm
not-
saying tonight is, and it's okay. If we're going to change the bar, we need to change it for everybody. And so what I'm saying is that in my experience, we've not approved a plat with a subdivision now I've not seen it today, but it's hard for me to think that your grass has grown a whole lot since this morning or yesterday. But what I am saying is that I understand that this development, your plat would be approved in probably any other municipality in East Tennessee with what you've done here. But that's not the track record and the rules and regulations that the town of Farragut has. The bar is higher in the town of Farragut, and our expectations are higher. And out of all people, you know where the bar is. You know how to get over the bar. And it's tough. I understand that. So again, I know you've made a diligent effort. I also suspect all these things could be resolved in a short period of time. If Daryl was here, I don't see him at the back table or anywhere in the audience. Maybe he could give us some enlightenment about the comfort level that he has that could this be done prior to the next meeting. We want you guys to get rolling. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about here is that it's different than what we've approved in the past. And it's hard for me to support something that is so far removed from what we've approved in the past, because we've given you flexibility, because at the end of the day, when you say, hey, we're going to get this done, you do get it done. And you've got a good reputation to support that. But right here, there's no precedent where, in my experience, that we've ever approved a subdivision plat with these field items yet to be complete. Again, I know there's not a lot of items, but the reality is it wasn't that many years ago when this wouldn't even been on the agenda tonight. The staff would have gone to you and said, hey, you're not even eligible to be on the agenda. And then, because we've tried to be a little more business friendly and relaxed and say, hey, let's look at, the big picture of things. We're seeing this, but this, maybe there's a big change. Maybe the rain today is going to get all your grass germinated, and you're going to get it up, and you have a nice stand of grass, and you guys are there. And I think you're there. I'm sure you're well more than 95% of the way there. It's just that the reality is if we're going to move the bar, we got to move it for everybody. And I'm okay with that. It's just that, we can't just move it for you.
Well, no, maybe this is the first step in moving the bar to something that's more realistic or appropriate. This is the first time that you've ever suggested, or the town engineer, a 3-month letter of credit.
Yeah,
Means you cash
I've
it
never
in.
heard of that either.
Right. Well, that's what we discussed, to incentivize that the items, if not completed before we ask for signature from him, are completed quickly, that they don't just drag out for year after year after year and
With a big letter of credit, that's a big stick to hit you with if you can't complete those items.
That is, $100,000 for
Sure.
$10,000 worth of work is a big letter of credit.
I know it.
So, anyway, I appreciate the conversation, but at the same time, I respectfully asked, approve this plat subject to the non-staff conditions plus the one additional to meet the town engineer's requirements for the punch list.
Commissioner Green, you asked one question. Did you have a second question?
No, I think I got answers to my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments, Mark?
Everybody sign up. No.
Okay.
We got two dimensions to this. One is the item in front of us right now, and then we got the generic going forward with more definition of the process and more elaboration on what's in the regulations that translate to the checklist. The way out of the box right now on this issue, to me, is the addition of item 10, which separates from anything we've done in 30 years I've been on the planning commission. And that's a pretty heavy hammer. And so I'm interested in going forward with a path out of this corner that satisfies what we need. And literally, I mean, that we could incorporate pretty heavy bonds for anybody else that comes for us. But I would also make a personal comment as a professional engineer. And your reputation has been outstanding in dealing with us through the years.
Thank you.
And I was totally surprised to see these pictures at this late stage. And even, well, maybe it made progress in the last day or 24 hours or whatever, I was quite surprised that this met any kind of standard in the back of your mind. I understand what you would do for your client, but I was a little bit disappointed at the fact that, well, even with the checklist being new, if I discount all the not applicable or items that really don't apply out of the 34, which reduces it to about 28, 19 have either a no or need issue from the town. Realizing this is new, it's still representative, and there's a lot of things in here to me that are very much common sense to a professional engineer like you. If you went out there as, just put your town engineer hat on and went out there with all your background and knowledge you looked at, you would have some of these similar comments. I mean, it might be worded the same, but you would have some of the same observations, both either safety items or non-safety. But I'm willing to pursue going forward with it with the addition of item 10.
Thank you.
Did you want to make that motion?
I make a motion that we approve the final plat subject to the 10 stipulations.
Second.
And Mark, do you have the wording for the 10th?
Yeah, for
Okay.
the,
Would you read it for the record, item number 10 for me?
that there would be The safety-related items have to be finished before the town engineer will sign the plat, and the other items that are not directly safety-related have to be finished before he will sign the plat, or a 3-month completion letter of credit in the amount of $100,000 be provided.
Have a second?
I did a second.
Yeah,
Louise seconded
she
that.
seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 4, discussion and public hearing on,
We had a nay vote.
Mark? Do we need to call the roll on that since we have a nay vote?
I got it, John.
No, he's got it.
Got it. Okay. Discussion and public hearing on a site plan to add a second floor to the First Baptist Concord Church Education Building, 11704 Kingston Pike, Zone R-3, Jeff Jordan, applicant.
This is a site plan to add, like you said, a second floor to the educational building at First Baptist Church Concord. The building was actually designed to have a second floor added in the future, so they're now moving forward with that. We talked about this at the staff developer meeting. They've made some adjustments to the materials on the addition, and it does now comply with our masonry requirement. It's all elevations are over 80% brick. And the other topic we talked about was parking. The parking allocations currently are based on the sanctuary size, which is obviously a church-related provision. But due to the fact that the church obviously has offsetting time from the school in general, they're really over-parked by over a couple hundred spaces right now based on the church ratio. They got over 1,300 parking spaces. The church is comfortable that they have enough parking to accommodate this addition. This is almost a 28,000 square foot addition, so it's a pretty substantial addition out there. The staff's comfortable with the parking. They're not proposing to change any other aspects of the site at this time. So the staff does recommend approval of this site plan. There were actually no subject to, so that they took care of everything that we had initially made as a comment to the applicant.
Is that a first?
It's rare.
Very rare,
It's very good.
especially on something as complicated and as big as this.
Yep. Yeah, good job with that.
Yeah, we'll start. Does anybody have a question or comment first of Mark?
None.
No. Okay, does anybody, and the applicant, will you tell us who you are? and-
Yes, I'm Jeff Jordan with Forrest Daniel and Associates Architects out of Daphne, Alabama, representing First Baptist Concord Church. Interesting thing is, I boat where Admiral Farragut had his most famous battle, so I'm Eastern Shore of Mobile Bay, so never knew this place was here. But
We hope you enjoy our museum.
thank you, thank you.
Should have brought some of the rain with you the other day.
We get a lot of rain. Mark stole most of our thunder on his comments there. It's a pretty simple renovation because the original builder put a flat plate concrete slab on top of it with anticipation of putting splice columns and building a second floor. So the footings have been designed for it. The roof slab has been designed as a floor. Everything sets itself up well for just proceeding right to that additional square footage. The architectural style of it is, the second floor is basically just a cold copy of the first floor. We originally submitted it with a little more stucco, but after Mark reminded us of the requirements to have, I think it was 75% brick, we went ahead and took brick all the way up to the crown element on top of the building. So as far as we know now, we meet all of the zoning requirements.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
Just congratulations for having the foresight to think about your growth needs, and
Yep.
you guys, I mean, seriously, it's a great job, and I mean, what a wonderful way to add square footage without having to tear something down or add impervious surface. So with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Do you have any questions or comments from the audience?
I did not have any sign up for this item.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
We have a motion and a second already.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for coming. And check out the museum.
I sure will, thank you.
Torpedoes.
I've heard.
Yeah.
Item number 5, discussion on request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code, Appendix A zoning, Chapter 4, Section 13, outdoor site lighting to allow for baseball and softball fields lighting that is custom designed not to affect neighboring properties. Jeff Jordan, applicant. And this is for discussion purposes only.
Yeah, First Baptist Church, as you all know, they've expanded their school functions over the years, and they'd like to have the opportunity to have baseball and softball games in the evenings. And of course, critical to that is the ability to have field lights, ball field lights. So when they came to us and was talking about this request, we don't have anything that specifically addresses this kind of situation. We have outdoor site lighting provisions in our zoning ordinance, and they don't really address ball field lighting. The only ball field lights that we have in the town currently are on public properties, either town parks or the Knox County schools. Of course, Knox County governs their property, so we don't really have anything that deals with private situations like that. The only thing that we have in our current outdoor site lighting provisions deal mostly with exterior lights on buildings and then parking lot lights on private parking lots. And the maximum height of poles in our current provisions is 28 feet. Due to the direction of angle that you need to illuminate most ball fields, that's just not going to be tall enough, and what you end up with, let me pull this up real quick, with a lower pole you actually ended up causing more problems with the neighbors because of the angle of the lights. So you have more spillover with the lighting if you were to comply with our current pole height provisions. So they're requesting to provide an exception in the pole height to allow taller poles for aimable sports lighting applications that would not affect neighboring properties. So the church reached out to a lighting expert from Musco Lighting. That's the same contractor the town uses. In fact, we've got some of their lights that are at our parks, some new lights that aren't operational yet on our tennis courts at McPhee that Musco did. So basically they put together some language that would ensure that the current requirements that we have for the foot candle strength at property lines is met with these type of lights, and that's 0.5 in a residential setting. And then they added an additional standard, which is something that we don't currently have, and it's a measurement that the lighting expert can talk about this a lot better than I can. It's called a candela. And candela is kind of a relatively new way to measure the directional intensity of lighting. So that's real important, obviously, in a ball field light setting. And they've established a standard of 7,500 candela, 150 feet from field edge, so that the effect of that is that it only illuminates the ball field. There's no spillover onto abutting property. So the kind of lights that you might associate with ball fields in the past, and they probably still some of these around, unlike this lower image where you can see them for miles away, is completely different from what they're proposing and what would be required with the standard that they're recommending. As far as going out and looking in the area to see if there's some lights like this, I'm told that over at Alcoa football field, high school, they have these new lights, so you might get the opportunity to go over there and watch Alcoa beat somebody to death, like I've seen many times. Then it'd be worth it to see that and to check out their lights. So the game will be over by the end of the first quarter.
Unless they're playing Maryville.
So you don't have to, yeah, that's the only team that
As an
they
alumni, I say
struggle
that.
with. That's right. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the new lights at the tennis courts at McPhee will have a similar technology to this. So when we talked about this item at the staff developer meeting, the height of the lights range from 60 to 80 feet, and that's generally consistent with what we have at our parks. And there was a question about whether, if the commission and the board are okay with providing for this, if there should also be kind of a cap on the height. And it was stated that if it was capped at 80 feet, that would pretty much accommodate almost any kind of ball field light that you would likely see in this community. So that's just something to think about there. But that was kind of an overview. I'm not by any means a lighting expert. I think if you had technical questions about what they're requesting, what a 7,500 candela, 150 feet from the playing edge, I don't really know exactly what that means, other than the end result is that there's no spillover once you leave the field of play. And I have looked online, and that's a pretty consistent standard, 7,500 candela. So, it seems to be in line with some other communities that are using this newest of lighting technology. Lighting is something that just is kind of like telecommunications. It's constantly evolving. And we're in the process of engaging the lighting person to help us with updating our outdoor site lighting provisions. And we may be presenting some things with that as well next month. But this is what's being requested at this time. And if you have any questions, I think the representative from Musco is here, and he certainly can answer the questions probably much better than I can. I do have some people that have signed up to speak on this whenever you're ready for that.
I have a question first. On one of the pictures you showed, the parking lot looked really dark. Is what?
That?
Yes.
And that's exactly what the objective is. You're only illuminating the playing field so that you have no spillover light. Once you leave that playing field, it's almost like going from, like flipping a light switch off, as I understand it. It's very, they can really target the playing field, really zero it in precisely with this newest technology. And that's why the height is important, because depending on the field of play that you're trying to illuminate, if it's not high enough for certain application, then that spillover becomes more difficult to control. So they have a range of 60 to 80 feet on their poles. There's some that are 60, and there's some that are 80, and there's some that are 70. So it's just depending on where they're at on the site and what they're trying to illuminate, with the end result trying to be to not, have any spillover.
Mark, I think this is a great opportunity for us to look at maybe standards that we could adopt all throughout the town that has to do with any kind of sports fields lighting, mostly at the town parks.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think there's a lot of good information in here that should be applicable everywhere. Not just here, but maybe some things as we upgrade and change and renovate and build new ball fields in the town of Farragut.
Oh, absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
these are things that this is great information for us to look at and to be able to adopt some standards that would work everywhere in the town.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Yeah, that would, because we have parks that abut residential areas, and we want to be good neighbors, and I think we are good neighbors. And if we have some tools that help us improve in that regard, then I think we're very open to that. So, yeah, I think it'd be good.
Mark, refresh my memory, what are we doing at Top Golf?
I'm trying to remember what they did. I think there's some provisions in that zoning district for the pole heights.
Yeah, we dealt with the pole heights on that.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were as concerned about spillover due to the fact that they've got interstate side
Yeah.
on one side and pretty much
I know we
surrounded.
dealt with
They
it
really don't have
and-
any residential. I don't know how many,
No.
yards or feet closest residential is, but
Proposing, if they looked into something like this, it might be a benefit to
I
them too.
personally, I like the way it looks. I think it looks real classy when you got the ball field just, kind of almost focused with the light, and you don't get all the spillover.
Well, I'm still concerned about the safety in a parking lot.
Well, that's a
You could have
completely
separate lighting.
different
You could have
application.
separate
They
parking
just,
lot.
they just don't have any.
25 feet tall
This
in the
is
parking
just
lots.
a,
So
yeah.
there will be lighting in the parking
Well,
lot.
yeah, I mean,
They're not required, though. We don't require lighting in parking lots. It's really an optional. If you do,
this image is just
Right.
to show you what the
Show
ball
them.
field light would look with this kind of application, to where it is pretty much only on the playing surface and it doesn't spill over into the parking lot.
But from an aspect of safety, we do need at some point in time to consider lighting in the parking lots as
Well,
well.
I mean, and I think that's what I mentioned earlier. We need to update our outdoor site lighting section. It's only 2 pages, but with all the lighting technologies that continue to evolve, I mean,
and the
we've got
nomenclature. The nomenclature is now changing.
nomenclature,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, wattage is like archaic. Nobody uses that. That just measures energy output. Has nothing really to do with lighting. Yeah, so we're going to try to work on that too. I'm not sure where that will be exactly at that point next month, but it won't hold them up. But that's what they're requesting, is just to basically amend that height, the pole height, and to provide for this opportunity, if y'all are open to that, and the board.
Okay.
I have some comments on this.
Okay?
I spent some time researching, I use that term loosely, that means looking on the internet, so take that in mind. And I'm not an illuminating engineer, so take that in mind as well. But it looks to me like the product that Municipal has offers good lighting and low spillover, and I think that's great. And it looks like our ordinance needs some fine tuning to represent that, some guidance on those lines. But my problem is with some of the specific wording of the 7,500 candela from 150 feet. As I researched it and as I looked, it seems to me that, as far as I could see, that Municipal was the only supplier/vendor that actually has that specification, which if we incorporate that into our ordinance, we've thereby excluded everybody else. So it turns out that there are some standards, and there's actually a model law that was written by the International Dark Sky International in coalition with the Illuminating Engineering Society, and they put together a model ordinance. And in that ordinance, the term candela is not in the ordinance at all. They have different ways of measuring spillover and what they call trespass light and all the other different terms. So the bottom line is, I'm in agreement that we need to revise. The 80-foot probably tower height is probably fine, but I'm a little worried about the specific candela. Perhaps we should say that as a target, and that we should meet recognized international standards for lighting, rather than making this particular standard mandatory in our regulation.
I mean, I'll defer to the lighting expert on those kind of questions.
I have to agree with John on that, because what we've learned at the staff developer was about the candela, and it's the first that you really, I've heard about it, or anybody has, because we've had conversations with Topgolf, we've had conversations with the town center on lights, and none of this has been with that particular word in it, so I think more of a universal standard that everybody else, I mean, maybe someday candela will be the normal buzzword, but right at this moment it's not, so I don't think we need to really get hung up on a new word that does not have a universal standard, because then you're limiting the vendor to one person, and that's not really.
And we use foot candles in that. We don't have a pole height that I can see in that, I haven't gotten a chance to read it thoroughly, the Outlet Drive Regional Entertainment and Employment District, but we use foot candles as the requirement in that.
And maybe the applicant can tell us the difference between foot candles and candela.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me here, and you're exactly right. Candela is a measurement.
Tell us your name and your address for the
Yeah,
record.
First of all, tell us your name and address and who you're with.
And Jeff Jordan, again, I'm the actual applicant. This is the representative from Musco Lighting that we brought.
Okay, thank you. And your name?
Thanks.
Greg, my name's Greg Gilly, and from Greenville, Tennessee. So I was just going to address this. You're exactly right. This candela came about recently with the LED lights. It started in the parking lot industry, started seeing it, the parking lot lights that you were referencing, is because they learned that measurable light is foot candles that we've all talked about for 30 years. And candela is glare. It's a measurement of glare. And we're involved with IDA for dark skies. We're on the board. And also IES. And this is a very forward-thinking term. And I thought that it would be a good opportunity to bring this up. And since we were talking LED sports lighting, the foot candles of a half a foot candle on a property line seems to be nationally wide. That's what everybody tends to fall back on. And that's a great standard. And then the other thing that we added in the verbiage of the amendment text is aimable lights, where that gets you where your pole heights are concentrating all your light on the ball fields instead of going out in Horizon or the neighborhoods or, being good neighbors. Candela is new. I mean, it's a new term. They got a new meter where you can measure glare. Glare used to be very subjective. So when you're driving down the road, something may be glary to somebody, and then somebody else it's not glary at all. If they, depending on their medical condition or their eyes, or if they're wearing prescription glasses. So that's where we came up with that. And just to be fair, the candela and measurement of glare is not a Musco thing. That's an industry-wide measurement. Where we get to as far as the 7,500 is another conversation. It started out, it was 10,000, and then it's been as low as 5,000 on measurements. Low beam headlights are 12,000 candela. So where we got that 7,500 was actually out of the IES, and that's based on a rural community having lighting. If you're in a city, it would be 25,000 candela, and then a subdivision would be about 10,000. So being familiar with Farragut, that I landed on the very conservative 7,500 just for conversation. I mean, we can talk. I'd be more than happy to talk, or we could just forget about candela altogether. But you guys are a great community, and what we've seen is just because it's no measurable light, I mean, we may have 0 foot candles, but if there is a sports lighting applicant that's not focusing that light right, then the neighbors 300 or 400 foot away, it's going to be glary to them. If they call you guys and say, well, it's glary, we'll take a light meter out there, and it'll be 0 foot candles, but it's still glary. So I was just presenting this to help you guys as a resource, to help protect you guys. It's more, you're probably seeing some glary parking lot lights and street lights at 12 foot, because when the illuminations change from metal halide to LED, LED can be really glary if it's not controlled right. So that's why the candela, this glare measurement and everything is coming up front, but it's on the very front end. We're seeing it in California, Texas, and to be honest, this is the first time I've presented it to a town in Tennessee. So it is new, and I'm willing to help you guys, or we can just forget about candela and glare. But it's not a Musco thing. Glare has been around on everybody's fixtures. Musco is also, we do all the National Park and Rec. We're on the board of directors for National Park and Rec with Mount Rushmore and all our big parks. So we're very familiar with IDA and Dark Sky Association.
It's
Let
kind
me
of
ask
funny
you a
that.
question.
Yes,
Go ahead,
sir.
Ed.
Are you the only vendor, or are there other vendors in the United States that can relate to a spec of like 7,500 candela in a specification?
Oh, absolutely. There's other vendors that can do it. Absolutely.
So it's more of a generic term than.
Like
than
foot
we
candles that you're
realize.
familiar with. Yes,
So
yes. ma'am.
electrical engineer, when you say candela, they're going to know exactly what we're talking about.
Well, they're
If they're a lighting engineer.
Yes, sir.
What I'd like to do, and it's probably, I don't think it's appropriate tonight, but as we kind of work through this and start drafting some language, is maybe take the meter, the handheld device, and go out to the parking lot, and you can show us, hey, this is the X number of foot candles, and based on a candela, it's this or whatever, because I think that's what people want to know. Well, show me what it's going to look like. because we can all use these things that sound great, and we can look at, actually, this actually looks like it actually might be a photograph, not a rendering. It says it's Cedar Stone Park in Smyrna. But nevertheless, I think what I would like to see is show us where one stops and one begins, and some of these things in actually application. We probably have some residents that would like to see that too, because we can look at all the pretty pictures we want, but we're not really sure until you actually see it. Quite frankly, the town, the way we've enforced our lighting ordinance has actually kind of been an anti-glare ordinance. So you'd have an individual that's a staff member that has to drive around and determine is that glare or not, because it was kind of anti-glare. That's glare. And then you would have a different interpretation of it, just like what you said. It's not really fair to the staff, because it's kind of subjective.
It varies.
And so I love where we're going with this, because I've personally struggled with the lighting ordinance in the town of Farragut, because it's subjective. And I think that there's, with all the new technologies that are available that no one would have dreamt of 10 or 20 years ago, there's a lot of things that you can do nowadays. Back in those days, if you put a metal, a 400 watt metal halide up at 80 feet, I mean, there's light bleeding all over the place. And so, because that was the only technology that was available, but things have changed now. So it's super exciting. I hope that, I hope the applicant has some time to kind of work through this, because I think this would be a town-wide change to an outdated lighting ordinance. Not to pick on the staff, but the reality is until we have an applicant that says, hey, you guys need some changes to get up with the times, there's no reason to change it. But now we've got somebody that's interested in doing some things and they're trying to be good neighbors. So I'm really excited about trying to move forward with some changes, and I'll yield the floor to other commissioners, and I think there's some folks in the audience that'd like to spend a few moments in talking about their concerns.
I've got one overarching kind of comment that says, we're focused so much on lighting. What we're talking about here is the path forward for a private field. So you get into things like PA systems, hours of operation. There's more than just lighting. Lighting's just one dimension of this.
Well, I agree. I think some of our rules should apply both to public and private fields. I mean, so now a lot of our fields are not used at night. I think the Anchor ones at Anchor Park, seems they're not even lit at all.
Dark park. Yeah.
But the Watt Road parks are lit, and McPhee, are they lit at McPhee?
They will be.
They will be lit. And so, I mean, I think these are things that we should talk about.
I'm just saying,
whether it's public or private.
More than just one dimension to it.
I agree. Yeah, sure.
You have swim meets now that, where you have lit pools, and, they chop it off at 10 o'clock. That's,
Yeah.
You've got to get it done before then, and then the lights have to go down.
Yeah.
It's another aspect of what we will be looking at. Like what Ed said, there's more to it than just the light. This happens to be what's in front of us right now.
It's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to say something. As a high school student, I've recognized the importance of having your own sports fields. But I am a bit concerned about the parking lot, because without lights, you have a bunch of teenagers probably together in cars. In a dark parking lot, that can be kind of dangerous, because teenagers are kind of reckless. We know this. I'll say it.
Glad you said it.
I'm not afraid to admit it.
Thank you for your comment.
But obviously with these taller poles, the distance doesn't go into these people's houses. But if we have these shorter poles in the parking lots, will the light not go into the subdivision?
Well, I think the picture was meant to convey that the light is focused directly on the field without having bleed over. And the bleed over is the most important thing, because we're trying to show that we don't light up neighbors' yards. So the thought would be that if this kind of language was approved, you would have lighter or taller lights for field only, and then once you got into a parking lot, if you lit it, it would meet the city standards,
down.
which is, I believe, 28 feet maybe?
It's a different kind of lighting, because on the ball field, you have to have an angle.
Yeah.
See, in parking lot lights, they have to be shining straight down.
Straight down.
Okay.
So it's a completely different kind of lighting application.
Well,
between
if you
the two.
use the way the philosophy behind the lights we use for parking lots, you would have a light probably at second base, and you'd have, which obviously doesn't work. So you can't just put poles out in the middle of a softball field or a football field or a baseball field. So we've got to use the technology. The only way to get these larger areas, these larger surface areas, you got to go a little taller. But with the technology now allows you to focus the light. I think it's real intriguing. I do kind of have concerns about, teenagers, they see dark parking lots, but we do have lots of dark parking lots in the town, and they're going to be an attractive nuisance whether we like it or not. But, I think that's
Be
something.
lit by parking lot lights if the property owner wants parking lot lights, and those parking lot lights would have to meet our
That's true.
outdoor site lighting
Yeah.
requirements. I think having a glare standard, like you said, Noah, would really benefit the town staff, because we struggle with that.
I know.
We've had some other kind of lights that recently that have been used, some string lights that we like, conceptually the idea, but some people think it's creating glare. And so what is glare? So having maybe something that can actually measure that and provide some standards that on the front end that you have to meet, that would basically ensure that you meet a recognized glare standard, would be a real benefit to the town for sure.
Lee, we'd like to know the brand and where to get that meter at, okay?
Got that for
Thank you.
One thing, you mentioned the PA. The reason we're here talking about lighting tonight is because it's a problematic issue for what any sports field would be trying to do. So that's one thing we identified as, hey, if we're going to try to do this, that's got to be dealt with. Any other items like that, we would abide by whatever rules you guys decide on ultimately. So we understand that there's still things that we have to correspond to pull something like this off.
And so your you and your business are the ones that are working with the fields as well, not just in addition to the building.
Yes, ma'am. We've got Musco on board to kind of help us with lighting input for, it's a high-tech field, and unless you have the guy that does it for a living, it's hard to talk about it. We've engaged a civil engineer who, at a later date, would provide a full site plan submittal for your decision-making.
Okay, thank you.
I want to clarify is that this is just dealing with the lighting amendment right now. So what they've shown on renderings of the church area that may or may not meet other requirements, it would have to be adjusted to meet, certain requirements, setbacks and whatever. So, I just want to be clear about that. And I do have some people that have signed up.
Anybody else on the planning commission have any questions at this point? Okay, then let's go to
The first one is Tom Reed, and after Tom, David White.
and like I said before, tonight, this is for discussion only. We're not voting on anything.
My name's Tom Reed, 320 Farragut Crossing Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee.
320.
Excuse me. And I've been a neighbor of the church for over 27 years. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, but we've been able to work our differences out. I wish I almost stayed at home now after Mr. St. Clair made his comment that lighting is just really a small piece of what we're going into with the sports field arena, particularly a private one. And that's what I wanted to bring up to the commission tonight, is that you need to consider other things like noise that gets into PA and all these other kind of areas. And that's kind of what's going on now with the church and some of its neighbors. The church has a wonderful facility out there. A lot of people enjoy it. It's shared by a lot of people. But part of it is a church, part of it is a school. And because it's got this dual use, the facilities are used quite a bit, particularly the athletic fields. We may have the school football team or some other athletic team may be practicing after school. During school, we've got the playground noise going on. On weekends, we've got soccer that the church sponsors. So it's fairly busy. And as we go into this sports field code area, I think it warrants some consideration to some noise issues and controls and how long the lights are allowed to go on at night, things like that. It sounds like you're kind of already interested in that. So that was my message. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Remind the speakers that we're on a 5-minute time per
Right.
speaker, so.
Our
and
speakers
I'm
have 5
watching
minutes,
that, so.
and he's,
David White's the next one, and after David, Jeannie Burkowski.
David White. I live at 314 Vista Trail in Bel Air subdivision. Of course, the church, we all want to respect the church and their members and everything they do, but there's some things that happened in the past that we're concerned could very well easily happen again. When the church first decided to become a school, they encroached on our subdivision. They began to buy some homes. The neighbors became concerned, and we had some meetings, and we were told that we're buying those homes for traveling evangelists, so they could stay there when they were traveling through. Not so. They promptly tore them down, moved our entrance road, and encroached on the subdivision. There was more meetings going on because an athletic field came up during the addition of the school. The pastor, who of course is not there now and has passed on, in these meetings, because the ordinance doesn't allow the fields in the first place or the lighting, and he guaranteed the subdivision residents that if they had an athletic field, there would be no lights or a PA. So the neighbors weren't too concerned about an athletic field. If you don't have it at night, you don't have the lights and you don't have the PA, it's not a big deal. Didn't turn out that way. Now they're back asking for the field. And I've been asked, is this in writing anywhere? No. One of my good friends and neighbors is here with me, has lived in there forever, was in most of the meetings. Why would you put in the lighting when you're talking to a pastor? Everybody trusts him. Didn't work out that way. You have ordinances that don't allow this. Why go through and change ordinances to encroach on our subdivision even more than they've already done? We need to leave things like they are. We've had enough. I was sitting on my screened-in porch last night about 7:30. They're having a function of something down there on one of the athletic fields. They obviously had a handheld megaphone. I could hear every word the guy said. I'm in the middle of the subdivision up over the hill down in the valley. We don't need it. They can have an athletic field. I don't think any of our neighbors care. We do not want the lights in the PA system. They can play in the middle of the day. They played football for years without lights. They can do it again. So we're asking you just to consider us. You're all excited about all these lights and lighting businesses and fields. Think about the neighborhood. Think about the neighborhood. We live there every day. We go to bed at night. We don't want to hear a PA system or fans yelling. It's one of the oldest subdivisions, if not the oldest, in the town of Farragut. Let's not change it anymore. Think about that.
thank you. Next.
Thank you, David.
So Jeannie Burkowski, and after Jeannie is Winnie Lang.
If that person, if you'll get back there and stand so you can come up next.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Brykolski. My husband and I have been residents of the, 329 Crestview Road, Farragut, Tennessee. My husband and I have been residents of Bel Air for almost 26 years. And yes, Bel Air is the oldest subdivision in Farragut. We also predated the church. It was built around 1962. Our subdivision was begun in 1949. We are an eclectic community as far as the styles and types of houses, and we have houses that are anywhere from 1,200 square feet to over 5,600 square feet. We have nice big lots with mature trees, wildlife, and we're a very unique neighborhood. The church has made several promises to us on a many variety of subjects. And unfortunately, they did not keep the majority of them. One of the promises they kept, which was in a large meeting around a bunch of people, that they were not going to have PAs or lights. And here we are. Yes, there is a problem with distrust with a lot of the people who live in Bel Air. Also Derby Chase, Glen Abbey, Farragut Crossing, Kingsgate, and even some people in Village Green. Because there are people in Village Green who can hear when they are using their portable PAs and blowhorns. Bullhorns, I guess they're actually called. I have some questions on the lighting, specifically. I was impressed by the presentation from the manufacturer's rep. I find that kind of thing interesting. I was in industrial sales for many years, so I was really paying close attention. But I do have some issues. Now, I do want to say FBC's parking lot that's next to Bel Air, they have excellent parking lot lighting. It's really good. I mean, it even helps a little bit on Bel Air Drive. So, and I appreciate you bringing that up. That was a great question. So that is not something that's a, huge concern as far as being a dangerous area. But when you've got lights that tall on an area that's fairly small, that you have to have a certain size field with where the lights are, it's not just some of the people in Bel Air, it's also right there at Derby Chase. And I think there's one house in Farragut Crossing that might be affected. Also, when you come up Bel Air Drive, it's a little bit of an incline, and it kind of curves around, and the softball field or soccer field is to the right. And as you go up, there is a hill, and it goes up. Now, once it's dark, and those of us who live in the back part of the subdivision, as we are coming out to go wherever it is we're going to go, and we come down Bel Air and we go up that hill, will these lights anyway impact whoever's driving that vehicle? That's something I think needs to be looked at. Also, they mentioned baseball and softball. That softball field is right next to a road. If they're going to be playing baseball and softball there, using these lights, there needs to be a very tall safety fence, chain link or whatever like they do at a lot of high schools, public fields and so forth. Because baseballs and softballs are very hard, and when they get whacked really well by a player, they break windows on houses and cars, and that could cause wrecks. The little cul-de-sac that's right there next to the field, there's two houses that are very close that easily, either one of them could get a window taken out or, be in your front yard. There's all sorts of freak accidents that can happen. We in Bel Air, one of the reasons I think most of us are upset is, once again, these projects, these plans have been developed to a point that they're ready to move on them, but never once came to anybody in our subdivision and said, hey, we've got some ideas about how we would like to expand. Do you all have any concerns or questions? Can we get together and talk to you? Back when they did the big expansion, nothing was brought up to us until that was basically a done deal. And we're all like, no, we don't like this. And they were quite surprised. Why couldn't they have asked us some questions? Why couldn't they see if we had any concerns? Maybe we might have had some input that could have helped them. But no, we are ignored. And this is where the distrust, once again, comes up. You know, there's a passage in the Bible when Jesus of the disciples, I'm
We
sorry.
need you to.
I'm on the end, I
Your time-
promise.
Your time is up.
When Jesus is talking to some of his disciples and they ask him, what is the most important of the laws, that that Jesus tells? And he says, the most important is, love thy neighbor as thyself. The church says it wants to be a good neighbor to us. Unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of that, but we'd really like to.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to us, and Mayor, thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. I really appreciate that.
Okay, we've got Winnie Ling and then Christine Haney, I guess, after that.
Hello, my name is Winnie Liang. I live in 11429 Bancroft Lane. So I guess I have a concern regarding the previous, item number 5, because it really depends on where the field is located to the road, because there are a couple of things you need to consider when you think about light, how bright it is, and the glare. So if you imagine in the road, you're driving down the road and all of a sudden there's something really, really bright in front of you, that can really impair whoever is driving on the road, and especially if that neighborhood is very hilly and bumpy. So that's just something I want to raise, and something that people should consider when they decide whether to build a field and how far is the baseball, softball field away from the road. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, we got Christine Haney, and then after her, Tim Wilson.
Christine Horvega,
Sorry, I couldn't read
that's
that.
okay, 12528 Fort West Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee. I just actually wanted to highlight one of the comments that Noah said, and I would ask that as we think about the lighting, not only for the fields, that we think about the neighborhoods, especially from the glare perspective, because I live in Fort West, and we have no sidewalks. We're not allowed to have lighting, because I moved here 10 years ago, and I asked about it. And our neighborhood gets pretty dark, and if you're on the road, there's nowhere for you to go except on someone's lawn. And a couple people have almost been hit in the evenings, and we would like to do some lights like that in some areas, but we're told there's too much glare, and you have all the light noise. So I would ask that you look at that, not only from a height, but also from a lighting for the residential areas that are looking to do that, because we've been shut down multiple times over it. So I ask that you look at that as well.
Christine Weissman, I
Yep.
got a question for you. Who shut you down?
When I went to my HOA and we had a meeting about our neighborhood.
Your HOA shut you down?
The HOA said that
Okay.
they had requested, but based on the ordinance earlier that, and again, this was previous, when I first moved here in the first 2 or 3 years. The HOA informed me that we had actually looked into it, but because of the ordinances, we were unable to get lights because it would go into other people's windows, and it would create the light noise, and they didn't want that, the glare. And so with these new lighting concepts, it would be great if we could start opening that up, or rewording the ordinances for the neighborhoods and subdivisions to say you can look into these kind of lights that maybe don't glare out as bad, or can be spotlighted down into the road so that people can use those, the walking around in the evenings without having issues. Because not all of us can put sidewalks in either.
I believe it must be an HOA thing, because we put 4 of them a year in Sugarwood and have been doing it ever since I've lived there, 30 years.
Okay.
So
Because,
there's-
they had indicated it was an ordinance, so I'll follow back up with that. Thank you.
I can say something about that because I live in that neighborhood, and it's also a cost issue. With the neighborhood having to do that themselves, we don't have a whole lot of money. And so that was one of the issues that was talked about quite a few years ago, too.
Okay, we have Tim Wilson. After him is David Starling.
Hey guys, it's Tim Wilson. I live at 301 Shadowfax Road, so that's Derby Chase. And actually in that picture there, if you look at the Warren area where it looks like somebody peeled out on a pickup truck or something and drove across the road, that's pointing right at my house. My house is right past that. So that's where I live. That's my home. I've lived there for about 20 years, and it's not the first time I've come here over an issue that has occurred with First Baptist Church. Now, I'll tell you this, I have friends that attend First Baptist Church. I don't think there's anybody there that has one nefarious desire in their heart. I think that they want to do good things, and they're thinking in this case about what they want to do. I heard you guys talk about the light and the glare a lot, about parking lot lights, but nobody's talking about 80-foot tall poles that are going to tower over my backyard. 70-foot tall poles, 60-foot tall poles, a total of 9 of these. 9 of them. And I guess I would just ask you to think about, I have a son who just had a child, he and his wife, and they bought a house over off Solway. And they're just getting started in life. If they bought that house, and right now, I got to tell you, houses are getting almost impossible to start in because the inflation is driving the cost of a home up so high. If the Planning Commission had authorized poles 90 feet high with banks of lights behind their house, I got to tell you, I'd be furious. And I would think, I'd just ask you to think about if your child bought a home, or if you bought your first home and thinking back to that immediately, what that does to the quality of life, what that does to the investment. I can't imagine, as well as that church uses their facilities, and they use them for the community, I can't imagine they're not going to use them up into the evening. It does make a lot of noise. Now, I'm getting old, and I go to bed earlier and earlier now, and I can hear things over there when they're having activities at the field. It makes a good deal of noise. They're having a good time. God bless them for it. But it doesn't have to be there. It doesn't have to be there to convert a soul. It's beyond the purpose, in my view, of what that church is there for. And I appreciate the good things they're doing, but it doesn't have to be. And I guess I'm wondering if the ordinance were passed with an 80-foot limit, could I put a badminton net in my backyard and put 80-foot poles in my backyard and put lights on them and be a really good neighbor? I just can't imagine that. I don't think we'd allow a flagpole like that in somebody's yard. Maybe we would, I don't know. And I don't mean to be sarcastic, and I don't mean to be contentious, but this is our life. And for these folks that live in the neighborhood, for some of them, it's probably the biggest investment there is. And I can assure you that looking at that and hearing that, if people were to come and look and consider buying a house, that's going to be a red mark on the house. It's going to have some effect on the value of the homes. And so I would just ask you to think about that, and I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you,
sir. Appreciate your comments.
And David Starling.
I live at David Starling, 206 Shadowfax, so I'm in Derby Chase, and I have concerns too. I guess one thing I would say, and I think the gentleman over here kind of was going down my line of concern, is that this shouldn't, in my opinion, shouldn't be viewed as a lighting issue. I think there's a systems engineering approach that ought to be taken. And not just look at the lighting, but look at the noise, look at the impact, look at the collateral factors that are going to be assessed to homeowners like me in that subdivision. So I don't know, and I don't know what those are, what all the factors are. I know it's nice in the evenings, especially in the fall, to have the windows open and nice cool breeze where I'm at. And I'm not sure what it's going to be like. Hearing the band playing, I understand the lighting is going to be restricted, but what do you do with the noise? You can control the lights maybe, but what do you do with the noise? And then there may be other factors, and I would just ask that whoever put those lighting ordinances in place originally probably did so with a lot of thought, a lot of care, probably with a lot of collaboration and decision-making. And those ordinances, and I'm not a builder, but I believe that those were put in place to help protect residents like myself and other homeowners, and to protect their concerns. And so I view them as kind of a fence. And I remember the words of Malcolm Muggeridge, who's long gone, a British writer who said, before you remove a fence, make sure you absolutely know what it was there for. And so if we're going to revise this ordinance that right now is protecting, in my opinion, myself, make absolutely sure we know what the unintended consequences of changing it are going to be. Because I am concerned about that. And it may be people who have a really good heart and they think they're doing the right thing, but it could end up with some unintended adverse consequences that now what do we do? So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Is that it?
That's all the speakers that signed up, yes.
Okay, does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments? So, have we given you enough information here?
I don't know. I mean, it's,
I think I need to remind us, what we're looking at tonight is updates to the lighting ordinance, not a particular site plan. And so I'd like to move forward with some changes to the lighting ordinance that kind of reflect the technology that's available today that would be applicable everywhere in the town of Farragut. And then if there's a particular applicant that has a site plan that they'd like to propose, then we can review that site plan at that particular time.
I will say this, the reality is this lighting already exists in our town, in our parks, and we don't have coverage in our ordinances to cover what we're doing in our own parks. We also have lighting on fields in Knox County, the soccer field next to Farragut Intermediate, and the lacrosse field behind Farragut Intermediate and the middle school. And those lights are the old-time lights, and they're glary, and it would be nice to push, I know this is much to ask of Knox County schools, but it would be nice to push them to, because those back up to residential neighborhoods as well. As well as the lights in McPhee Park at the tennis courts, they back up to an existing neighborhood. And of course, Mayor Bob Leonard is in a residential area as well. So whether they're existing in the town already, and we don't have any ordinances to bring them into compliance.
Yeah, they just got through replacing the lights at the high school.
And those are very bright.
Yeah, and they're very tall.
Well, whether we like it or not, the Knox County schools, they're going to be exempt from our municipal codes per the Tennessee Code Annotated, which is not put together by this body. It's put together by the folks, the legislatures in Nashville. So, with that being said, we can ask all we want, but unless they have the desire and the budget to make changes to those lights. But what we can do as commissioners and residents of the town of Farragut is when the town of Farragut has public facilities that either are proposed as new facilities or need to be upgraded or renovated, then we can take a look at our lighting ordinance and figure out how to try to bring those facilities into compliance. And that's where I think this lighting ordinance would be valuable, and we can sure ask Knox County to participate in that, and they can either acquiesce or deny.
So we'll move on to item number 6 now. Discussion on a request to amend the Farragut Municipal Code Appendix A, zoning Chapter 3, Section 1, or I guess, Agricultural District A, to provide for the one accessory dwelling unit provided certain criteria can be satisfied. Carrie Archer, applicant.
This particular request would allow an accessory dwelling unit on a lot of record, that is, a lot that's already recorded, in the agricultural zoning district. The agricultural zoning district is increasingly fading away from the town because of just the population growth and the changes in our community. There's still some areas, mostly in the southwest part of the town, that have some agricultural zoning. A couple other areas in the town. So this would be kind of specific to the agricultural district. The ordinance really, probably, this district language probably needs to be updated frankly, and this is kind of a good opportunity to look at it a little bit more in depth. We just don't deal with agriculture district much because most of the time, the only time we're dealing with it is somebody rezoning it so that they can create a residential development. So there is an existing provision in the agricultural district that does allow for 3 detached single-family dwellings as a use permitted as a special exception through the Board of Zoning Appeals. And there are other uses in that section that probably need to be looked at. It does give the BZA some review standards in another section of our zoning ordinance, and one of those standards is that the request has to meet all requirements that are set forward for that particular zoning classification. And one of those things for agriculture is that there's a 5-acre lot size for a dwelling unit. So if you're going to request 2 dwelling units or an accessory dwelling unit, with that kind of logic, you would need at least 10 acres to meet that standard. The applicant has a 5-acre piece of property that fronts onto Allen Kirby Road. Is kind of highlighted there on the screen with that dot. It's part of a subdivision that was platted a number of years ago. Doesn't have a public street interior to it. It kind of predates some of our current subdivision regulations and fire code requirements. But it does have, I think, a minimum 5-acre lot size that's associated with the development. So in reviewing the existing language and what the applicant would like to be able to do, I think they have some family member that they'd like to have nearby that they could care for in the future, build a second home, and be on the same piece of property. It was pretty apparent in looking at our existing provisions that this district needed some updates. So, as we've grown as a town, there's been a need for providing for, the infrastructure needed for our services, and that's created some changes in our subdivision regulations and our fire code. So the current provision, the opportunity for 3 detached dwelling units with the special exception is really kind of outdated and impractical, and that really needs to be looked at. I think from a staff's perspective, if the commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen ultimately are okay with providing for the opportunity for an accessory dwelling unit in this context, that it should be a use by right. You associate you provide certain criteria that particular request would need to meet, and in working with the applicant, we kind of talked through some things that would be pretty. There's not a whole lot of properties there are some, but not a whole lot of properties that would be able to meet the criteria that we talked about and that was in the packet. Obviously, you'd have to have at least 5 acres. It had to be a lot of record. There would have to be no more than 1 existing dwelling unit on the property. Another thing is that the lot would have to front directly on an existing public street for at least 100 feet. And that way, it kind of sets it up for the opportunity to better meet our fire code requirements. You're closer to available infrastructure. Should, in the future, the property be allowed to be subdivided into another lot, that it already has public road frontage and utility and fire suppression access that would be available. That the additional dwelling unit would have to meet the setback requirements of the principal dwelling unit in agriculture. The additional dwelling unit would be situated in a way that it could theoretically exist on its own, so it wouldn't be right next to the other structure. It would be far enough away that if, let's say, the side setback requirements in agriculture is 25 feet. So with that kind of language, you'd want to try to have the buildings 50 feet apart, so that if the other lot was subdivided someday in the future, it may have to be rezoned to do that, that it could exist on its own. And then the access, they would need to have shared access. Again, this is an accessory dwelling unit to the principal dwelling unit, and then it would have to satisfy the applicable utility code and fire suppression requirements. And that's another reason why we have the public road frontage criteria in there. So that's kind of the request. I think a separate kind of discussion is really dealing with that Section C, the existing agricultural district. There's some uses that are permitted as special exceptions other than this 3 detached dwelling units, like quarries and roadside stands, dog kennels, commercial livestock, feed and sales yards. Really, in reality, those are outdated with what the town is now. We used to be the Farragut Farmers, but that was decades ago. So, for better or worse, I think this section probably is part of this, not to hold her request up, but should be looked at comprehensively as part of this and just address it all at one time. I would propose just to remove that section in its entirety.
The whole,
I'd have to
yeah.
talk with the town attorney about it and get his thoughts on it, but I think most of those provisions are, not really relevant anymore.
Mark, I just have a quick point. I know in the title of this, we're saying accessory dwelling unit. I would like to avoid using that term, only because we went, a few years ago, I think you'll recall, we went
I
through
recall
several.
that,
Yeah, several months of trying to figure out accessory dwelling units, how do you fit it into
Yeah.
existing, and after, 8 months, we threw our hands up and said, we're not doing this because we couldn't figure it out. So I'd like to stay away from the word accessory because I don't want to define it.
Okay.
I'd like to leave that.
A second dwelling
Yes,
unit.
I'd like to let
Yeah,
a
that's fine.
future board and planning commission define that. The other thing I'm hearing is, I appreciate that you said 100 feet frontage. To me, that means it's going to require some kind of control or somewhat manipulation of the site plan to make sure that if they go in for future subdivision, it could happen. That's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing.
That's right.
Okay. Those are the only points I had.
Okay.
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments for Mark at this point? If not, we'll hear that from the applicant.
I'm Carrie Archer. I reside at 400 Saddle Ridge Drive in Farragut, but my husband and I purchased this property at 1300.
Could you speak into the microphone, please?
Oh, sorry, sure. 13,000 Allen Kirby Road is also, we also own that property. So, and if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Years ago, there was actually a split level house on your property, and I always thought, well, I wonder if somebody will keep that and make that the guest house and then build a big house behind it or something.
That's exactly
And
what we.
I don't know if it was you guys or a previous owner that tore the house down that used to be there, but I actually kind of remember the house that was there, and so
There is a split level on the property currently. That's the one we want to keep as a guest house.
that's
or
well, there you go.
for in-laws or my parents, and then we would like to build a little bit setback from that.
Well, that's exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
I just didn't, for some
Yeah.
reason, last time I drove by, for some reason didn't see it or.
There's a
missed it.
beautiful, and the property next to us, a beautiful white farmhouse, absolutely beautiful. So, yeah, we have good neighbors over there. But we're hoping to propagate blueberry plants. We've got almost 30 blueberry bushes already on the property that we planted this spring, and just have a little nursery and orchard at our property. So.
Awesome.
I want to say, earlier this week, and this is just a completely offside, you talked about us being the Farragut Farmers. They're trying to build a chicken coop at the high school, and they're thinking about bringing in goats. So we're finally coming in full circle. We're back to being the Farragut Farmers.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Kudzu's nearby, so they can just.
Is it your proposal, if we go through this and work through, that we're going to have an amended, you're going to try and work through the rest of that agricultural district to bring it up to contemporary standards?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I'll run it through town attorney, but I could have something ready for a recommendation next time, I think.
Okay.
Seems to me pretty straightforward, but I'll need to
Mark,
make
there was
sure.
there was a philosophy that you kind of opened up with, and I want to make sure we're on board with the applicant. You had talked about if our intent has been 1 unit per 5 acres, then 2 units would require 10 acres, and if our applicant has 5 acres, well, therein lies a problem. So are you thinking about moving forward with some of the language you've talked about based upon, as long as you have a minimum of 5 acres, you would be eligible for one additional secondary dwelling unit?
That's right.
If Louise coined the appropriate term for that. So,
Yeah,
Okay.
and take out the 3
Yep.
thing, because that's not tied to any real
well, it really,
criteria.
the history of the town, we really try to stay away from special exceptions.
Yes.
I mean, it's rare.
Yeah, I don't like them.
Can't remember the last time a special exception
No.
was, but I'm glad because it's one of those things that are subjective. One BZA may approve one thing and the next BZA a couple years down the road may
Well,
not.
they have
So,
standards that they have to go by, but it's, if you can do it with just building good language as a use by right, it's to me a better process, because you all are more familiar with the ordinances, and because you deal with them more than the Board of Zoning Appeals does. And it would probably be better just to take it through one entity.
I agree.
I have a question, I guess. What's your timeline for your desire to construct this second residence?
We're hoping as soon as possible. I actually wondered if it is possible to, when would be the earliest that we could?
That'd be my next question to Mark. If we need to change this ordinance here, then what's the timeline?
Well,
for
if it's
staff
ready
to be
for
able to-
y'all to make a recommendation in October, then it would go to the board. The board only meets once in November and December, though, so it'd probably be the end of the year by the time it got through the board.
I'm going to propose an idea. There would be some risk on the applicant's part, but, I mean, it's possible that we could hold up a CO on your future home, but, and the risk that I talk about is all of a sudden, if for some reason this whole idea either failed at this body or failed at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, then you'd be required to tear down the split level prior to you getting the CO of your house. So, with that being said, and I know how construction is and trying to get a foundation in January, which is kind of the timeline we're talking about now, is very difficult that time of year. So that might be something that this body, or at least myself, might be open to, but you just need to understand the risk. I guess the upside to it is that's kind of where you are today. Basically you're being told, hey, if you want to build a house, you need to tear down the old house. And you may not have anything to lose, other than, you would just maybe sell the property and go buy 5 acres somewhere else and do what you want to do. But that is something that I would be open for discussion. I don't want to get into a long-winded discussion about it, but if all of a sudden that was appealing to you, this board could then, make that decision. I mean, our town attorney's here, but I don't see why we couldn't, give you some guidance if you're assuming you already have a general contractor ready to go and y'all are chomping at the bit. And now if you haven't started that process, you're like, it's going to be January till you get started anyway.
No, he could start tomorrow if we
Her
let him.
guidance needs to come probably from the remaining board members, at least one more.
Were you talking about with the Board of Mayor and Alderman?
Yes.
Like I said, there's still
Because that's
risk
who
on your
has
part.
to
I mean, there
approve
could be
it.
something that could change, and they could, irrespective of the recommendation of this body, the Board of Mayor and Alderman could deny it. But that is something you could think about, moving forward to get you going a little quicker instead of having to wait till January.
Can I ask another question?
Well, sure.
So what would that look like, I guess? How would?
Well, I guess what that would look like
Proceed at risk.
is you could proceed. I doubt we may have to get the town attorney, because technically if you have an occupied house right now, and then all of a sudden we're giving you a building permit on a new house, there's going to be some rights that you would immediately lose to the existing house.
Okay.
That would be in jeopardy for some period of time until this is ratified ultimately by the second reading of the Board of Mayor and Alderman, which sounds like it would occur
Meyer,
the
can I make a
second week in
suggestion?
December. Sure.
This is a good conversation for you to have with David and Mark.
Okay.
Separately, because there's a lot of pondering that I don't even know.
Right. Well,
So-
and there may be some legal issues
Yeah.
that
So that's your
that
next
we want to
step.
make sure
Okay.
that, you know, that this, we're not overstepping our
Sure.
boundaries, and
Yeah.
and I'm trying to
Absolutely.
opine
Yeah.
on things that I'm not
Yeah.
qualified to opine on.
Do I understand,
None of us are.
do I understand there's no one living in that house?
There's nobody living there right now. We're using it for storage, like, it's 5 acres and we have a,
Barn right
it
now.
is our barn right now.
Well,
Yeah.
why don't you, if it was me, I would maybe, you and your general contractor and maybe some folks from the town staff, you guys get together and talk about, the pros and cons of what I just discussed. Your other option is
It's
wait
just
till wait till it works
Okay.
through the bureaucratic process.
Sure.
And then hopefully you'll get the end result, you know, sometime by
Yeah.
the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, that was for discussion purposes only tonight.
Did you get enough direction from us, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you all want the other section to be looked at, right?
Right,
Just deal with
right.
that all at once, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
That's,
We're giving you several of those tonight, I think. Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on a text amendment to the CLUP associated with the medium and high-density residential land use designations, Town of Farragut applicant.
If you remember, prior to the meeting last month, we had a workshop that dealt primarily with housing issues and the relationship of the comprehensive land use plan to existing zoning provisions, looked at some other housing options that we don't really clearly provide for currently in some cases. We had a good discussion. And it kind of gave us some background for an item that was on the regular agenda for workshop purposes only. And that was dealing with medium-density residential and high-density residential land uses in our plan. You know, changes that we may want to make to the text for those two land uses. And during the discussion, of course, I discussed the history of the medium-density residential. We've talked about this a number of times when the comprehensive land use plan was updated in 2012, and we actually mapped the future land uses. The medium-density residential land use was a very broad range in density, and it had a really broad selection of housing types, description of different housing types that may fall under that land use. So in dealing with that through some rezonings, it was very apparent that that was just too broad and it really needed to be narrowed down. So in October of 2018, we had made some changes to the plan, to the future land use map, that basically broke that medium-density residential district into, we kept the medium-density residential, and it kind of became a 6 to 8 dwelling unit if you're just talking about density land use, and then created a new land use called high-density residential that was 9 to 12. And then we mapped two existing high-density residential projects on the future land use map as high-density residential as Lanesboro and Overlook. So an issue in relation to the change to the future land use map was that we needed to look at the text that corresponds to the map and update the medium-density residential text and create text for the high-density residential land use. That deal with the intent of the district, the location, the density, the kind of character for those. So when we talked about this at the workshop last month, it was pretty clear to me that based on community input that we've had and the fact that we've had some recent multifamily projects that have been approved, that the feedback I got was that in terms of high-density residential, kind of a traditional larger scale multifamily project, that we have satisfied that aspect of our future land use. That land use designation description, when we do create something, should acknowledge that and basically not provide for that land use anywhere else in the future. So it should just acknowledge that high-density residential is where it exists now or where it's already been approved, but not in any other areas. And then medium-density residential, after we looked at a number of housing products that might kind of fall in that kind of land use designation, to really kind of talk about how that land use can be used in the community as a transitional kind of land use, and maybe for certain infill properties, to kind of narrow the scope of the housing products that could be available in medium-density residential, to make them more in scale with their surroundings and would be able to transition better, and also be able to transition internally if it's a larger piece of property. So some key emphasis would be on really what gets built rather than just focusing on the density. What's it going to look like? What's the relationship of the houses to the street, streetscaping, gathering spaces? How do we create something that could be appealing to a variety of age groups, and maybe something that we don't really clearly have right now, maybe to the degree that we might want. So what I tried to do based on that feedback was put together a resolution for consideration this evening. This slide shows the existing language that we have for medium density residential. As I mentioned earlier, it has a pretty broad description in terms of the kind of housing that might fall under. And then this was the proposed language dealing with medium density residential. And then in terms of the high density residential, we don't have language right now for that. So this is obviously the proposed language for that. Just to kind of summarize some of the stuff with the medium density, again, the focus, the intent is that we're going back to the increasing diversity of housing choice, because that's one of our strategies in the plan. And then this kind of land use is providing for transitional and infill housing options with a residential scale that's compatible with its surroundings. So we talked a lot about scale at the workshop, and I think that's been an issue with the public with some of these larger apartment projects. It's been really the issue of the scale, that it's kind of commercial rather than residential in scale. You got large parking lots, tall buildings. They're just not in scale with their surroundings. So that's something we focused on here. Looking at, I'm just kind of reading some of these off here. Vacant and underdeveloped parcels, abutting collector or arterial streets where lower density residential may be less desired and marketable. These are locational considerations for medium density. Transitional areas between lower density residential and non-residential, like mixed use neighborhood areas. And then transition areas within or on the periphery of the mixed use town center. Density, potentially 6 to 8 units per acre. But again, provided it's compatible in building scale to existing abutting residential developments. So that doesn't mean you can't transition internally to some kind of different footprint, but what's on the periphery, kind of like what we did with Gary Keckley's project, the villages, the housing that would be on the periphery of his development have footprints that are comparable to the residential subdivisions that they abut. So that's the idea with that. Character would be a mixture of residential that can transition to its surroundings and internally, from small lot single family detached to cottage cluster and attached single family, not to exceed 2.5 stories. I just put the stories in there because, we looked at a slide at the workshop that had footprint sizes and height of different residential developments, and even though I think the feedback I heard is that people liked the townhomes of Wentworth, but the footprint was bigger than a lot of the apartment buildings. It's about 15,000 square feet in some of those. The key was the other things that they did to give it a residential scale, and key to that was height, to me. Roof pitches, and maybe the brick colors, we can't really regulate that. But we can regulate the height, so that's why that was built in there. Housing types for varied age groups that are well connected internally to their surroundings. And then a heavy emphasis on streetscaping and gathering spaces that create interest and engagement. Again, the focus is on really what gets built and what's its value to the community. Is it creating a destination? Is it blending in with its surroundings? Is it offering the community something of value and not just another development, but actually a destination that blends in well with its surroundings and the community. So I don't know if anybody has any comments on the draft language with medium density residential first before we get into high density residential. I do have some people that have signed up to speak on this, just whenever you're ready for that. But if anybody has any questions on this slide, I'll be happy to try to. I did substitute the pictures as well. We got the 2-story townhomes on the top there. That's, I think, a product in Franklin. And then that cottage cluster concept that we looked at the workshop session, where small footprint buildings kind of clustered around a common open space. It's kind of a unique design, but it could be something that could fit in a medium density residential land use. So,
Mark, I'm going to share with you a few comments that I received from, actually he's in the audience, but I'll share some of your comments that you had given to me. Where location, where it says vacant, underdeveloped parcels abutting collector or arterial streets, the section where it says where lower density residential may be less desired and marketable, instead of saying that, they provided language that was a little bit more on the positive, saying where medium-density residential provides optimum transition and needed diversity of housing choices.
yeah, just send me that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what do you guys think of?
I actually
Yeah, I
struggle
think
with that
be
particular
positive,
sentence
yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Because it's subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also cyclical with the particular economy at that moment in time. And so I tried to come up and wordsmith it, and Louise, or maybe with some help of somebody else, did a great job doing it.
Yeah,
So,
that sounds good.
so
Yeah.
I
What you
definitely,
said
I think
sounds
that's
good to
I
me.
would like to strike that section and insert what Louise just said.
Okay, I'll send you that
I'm
language.
fine with that. Yeah.
And I would like to double down, you say, we talk about residential scale and the intent. Well, I would like to. This was another suggestion, was in character, add a point that says residential scale and style and appearance. I'm not sure if style is a good word, but just, again, communicating that we're looking at a residential scale in the character. Obviously, it's in the intent, but I'd like to bring that back down into character
Break
as
down
well.
what scale means. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I think the scale is the one that's easy to understand. I think the one I probably struggle with is the style.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean, how do you define? I mean, there's modern residential style, and there's
Yeah.
farmhouse style, and
So leave
traditional
residential,
Williamsburg. I mean,
residential, just leave it residential scale.
Well, I mean, it was the concern that was needed something to
Well, just to-
describe
to-
what that means, or
Well, because it is character as well. I mean, I know the intent is with a residential scale compatible with its surroundings, but to bring that down into character as well just confirms that that's what we're really looking for, is that we're going to get that residential feel. I don't know
I
if
don't
I'm
know.
making any, if
Yeah,
that
I'm
makes
not
any
sure.
clarity, or if it's excessive and not necessary.
I don't know. I don't have a comment on that. Really.
yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to think somebody would want to take advantage of this and not create a residential feel, but
Okay.
it's subjective.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think what,
Well, we
I
stated
try to
it.
think, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What could somebody slide in that is not the intent of what we're trying to draft? And I cannot think of it.
And you have to understand that this is a land use plan. These are policy statements.
Right,
They're
that's
not,
true. We're not
That's very
creating
they're not
zoning.
super specific.
Yeah.
They're just kind of gives you the broad idea from which your regulations, if we change zoning provisions,
Yep.
should capture in more detail.
Okay,
A risk taker is going to look at this before he makes a decision on what he's going to do, so
yep, yep,
I think that needs to be what we actually look at.
okay.
Other ones that,
I will say, just for people, to understand, as a municipality, we have the, and I pulled it up because I had to figure out where our statutory authority was on creating a design review commission. We have the authority to develop general guidelines for all non-residential properties, multifamily residential properties, and entrance to non-residential developments. We do not have that same ability for residential properties, so that's why you.
Well, let's be here, single-family detached residential properties would probably be a better, not to steal your thunder, Louise, but just
Okay.
make sure there's no misunderstandings.
Well, I'm just reading straight from our charter.
We definitely dictate multifamily residential.
Well, it says here in
Yeah.
multifamily. We can do multifamily. We can do multifamily and non-residential. It doesn't, so I'm assuming that residential, single-family attached, single-family detached, we do not have the right to have any kind of say, design guidelines.
That's correct, and nor do I have the desire to try to tell people what color
Neither
to
do
paint
I.
their house.
I agree. I'm just making it clear.
Right.
Which would get back to eliminating the word character, for instance.
And so we can't
restrict
specify materials and
Right.
such that we do for our commercial.
We can commercial,
Yes,
that's where the brick
Right.
number.
yes.
Yeah.
That's what I just said. I'm just trying to provide clarity.
Do we have
I
any
don't
more,
think I provided clarity.
are there any more questions and comments from the planning commission?
you may have some on the high density. Does that kind of capture the main topics that we were talking about? I guess is what I was kind of wanting to make sure about.
I thought so.
Do we have?
Odd statements, they're not super specific, and I just try to keep them in the same general scale and format of the other sections, without adding a whole lot of other stuff, so.
I'd like to hear from
Yeah.
maybe anybody in the audience or
I
a
do have
developer
two.
that has
Two that have signed up, yes.
developed both medium and high density.
He's got people signed up. Let's,
I guess
I've
the
got,
question is, do we go through high and then do all the
let's go through
comments
high
on
first.
at one time? I think we
Okay.
Yeah, why don't-
better approach to
Yeah.
hear the
Yeah,
high
that's
and then address both sections with the comments.
Yeah, that's fine.
People don't have to come up twice or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, high-density residential, we don't have any text for it right now, and we've all known that we need that. Even though we may not be prescribing this anywhere else, if we've got a mapped land use, we need to have some text associated with it. And so I just tried to put together some language kind of consistent, again, with the feedback that I've heard from citizens and from Planning Commission. Increasing diversity of housing under the intent section, that's existing language. So is the second provision, as far as stuff that was taken from medium density. This will be, in terms of location, limited to areas where it exists or has been approved as part of a planned commercial development. Abutting or having direct access to major arterial streets that are convenient to the interstate. Because you look at the outside of the mixed-use town center area, you got Lanesboro, you've got the Overlook, and you got the project on Watt Road. They're all relatively convenient to the interstate because they're all pretty close to arterial streets that can get you to the interstate pretty quickly. The density, again, as we talked about, 9 to 12. The character is what it is, a multifamily residential up to 4 stories, footprint of up to 15,000 square feet. I think that's the largest footprint we have in the Overlook. And it's integrated internally and externally, vehicular and pedestrian connectivity, and consists of functional gathering spaces for transitional areas and community engagement. Again, I'm just trying to keep it relatively simple and acknowledge that what we have is basically what we have in terms of this land use. So if anybody has any questions or additions or modifications, I'd certainly be open to looking into that.
Why 4 stories? Is there any,
Because that's what we have.
that's what we have?
That's existing.
Okay.
Overlook is 3 stories with the basement, but it's functionally 4 stories.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Okay, you want me to have
Call.
speakers?
Mhm.
Okay. Doug Horn, you ready? Speak? Okay. Just come to the microphone, please. And after him is John Wright.
Okay, Charlie, you said you first, go ahead.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It don't matter. It's up to you guys.
Well, mine comments are brief anyway. John Wright, Development Manager at Horn Properties, 412 North Cedar Bluff Road. Can you go back to the medium slide, Mark?
Yeah.
When you said last month that you were going to work on rewriting some of this stuff, I did not envy you that task. And I think you've done a fine job. I don't have any problem with much of this at all. It still doesn't get to the heart of the matter, though, that the property in question is still looked at as medium density, yet it's still zoned R1. And our efforts to get it rezoned have not been successful. So we would like to see some compatibility between the zoning and the land use plan. So what do we need to do to get there? Would be
Well,
my
I mean,
question.
to rezone it, you'd have to go through the zoning map amendment request. I mean, that's completely different. What we're trying to do right now is, in our plan, just have some text either modified or added altogether in the case of high-density residential. And then from there, I mean, that kind of is a guide to what someone could request through your regulations, through our zoning. So we're just kind of establishing some updated language for this land use.
So
Yeah.
Waverly is R4 and
Mhm.
Baldwin Park is R3. And
That's
our
right.
property sits in between those two, pretty much.
Yeah.
So do you have a recommendation for what the zoning board might consider?
Well, I mean, it's not really my role to make that choice. I don't know what you have in mind for the property. I think, we've obviously tried the multifamily, and that's not what the community wants. I think you all
Sure.
know that.
We've conceded that.
I think if you have some other products that you want to request and take it through the process, that certainly you'll be heard and everything will be properly considered.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm Doug Horn, 12103 South Fox Den. And yes, we've got 40 acres here, and we have attempted to do senior family, multifamily. We were stricken down by the Planning Commission on that. I think the wording changes that you're talking about, if we understand what they are, probably are okay. What we want to make sure of is that we preserve the density. As you said, Mark, from 2012 to 2018, the density was 6 to 12 for our property at 40 acres off Boring Road. And then on October 18, it went 6 to 8, which we accept that in the land use plan. And we know in Farragut, land use plan means a lot because we've had some other efforts in Farragut that was stricken down because it didn't adhere to the land use plan. This property we have now does adhere to the land use plan 6 to 8. So as long as the wording is what we think we understand, it's hard to understand every comment that was made tonight, the wording in the text of the medium density residential, as long as we keep the 6 to 8, we're fine. We're okay. And we will be asking for zoning and go through that process, John, for medium density 6 to 8.
Mark Shipley, which zoning districts most mirror medium-density residential?
Well, mixed-use neighborhood allows up to 8, and that's really was one of the workshop discussion items that we had last month, is that we've got R4, which goes up to 6 units per acre, but there's that missing middle, and there's that kind of area in between that we need to have a community discussion about. And that was an introduction to it at the workshop. Was
And
to try
that
to
was
say,
the mixed use, what district, what are we calling that again?
well, I mean, mixed-use neighborhood
Yeah.
allows for
Up to 8.
up to 8. If the
But it has a
residential,
commercial component typically
it has
to
to
it.
be a transitional component of a larger kind of mixture of residential and non-residential, similar to what's happening on the Swan Farm. That's a mixed-use neighborhood land use. It's a neighborhood convenient commercial zoning district. So I think that's really kind of the missing area right now, that we probably need more input from the community, in my opinion, some visioning to figure out in that 6 to 8 unit range, if you want to just base things on density, which I've said earlier, I don't like basing things on density because it doesn't assure you of anything of what actually gets built. But it is a guide that we have in our current plan that people kind of understand. But I think we need to have a discussion about what could fall into a look and feel of something comparable to a density of 6 to 8 that could transition properly in an area that may have existing residential communities that abut part of the property.
Mr. Horn, what I was trying to do is not necessarily initiate discussion tonight, but try to initiate some brainstorming to think about maybe there's a zoning district that hasn't even been created yet that is very appropriate for what you have in mind, and hopefully the math works financially, and then also is more palatable to the Planning Commission as well as to the residents. And we've done that. There's been a lot of zoning districts over the past 20 or 30 years that we never even thought of until an applicant brought an idea and said, hey, have you thought about this? And we said, no, we haven't thought about that, but that sounds pretty interesting. Let's discuss it further.
We did it with Gary Keckley's project, if you remember.
We did it with BD-4. I mean, I worked on that for a long period of time.
The
We did it with
neighborhood
the
convenient
OSRs and
commercial
OSMRs. I mean, there was
That's
a lot of things that we worked on that, as times change, that I think for better or for worse, what you heard, there wasn't an appetite for R6 anymore, especially on your property. And so, like I said, there may be a zoning district that and who knows what it's going to be called, an R5.5. But nevertheless, I think that the Planning Commission and the residents and the staff are willing to try to work towards something that is not only maybe a good fit for yours, but a good fit in the town to try to create, some of this higher density, and I didn't use the word high, but higher than what's typical in the town of Farragut, which were mostly just single-family, lots, and some of the things that's kind of being envisioned here that helps the math work on more valuable pieces of property.
I think we can see the 6 now, okay, but I think the 8 needs to have a discussion. We can see 6 now, like what Mark just said. It's there already.
Yeah, the Swans, the north part of that, if you just take the area where the townhomes are being built on the Ivy, that's a little over 6 units per acre, just to give you an idea of what that looks
Well,
like.
R4, which was, didn't we say Waverly Court was R4 already?
Yeah.
And so that's already at 6.
No,
but-
it's not that
Oh, it's
high.
not up
As
to
far
6.
as a built density, it's not, no.
Okay, but their allowable density was up to 6. Okay.
Yeah.
And then but we're looking for something maybe that would be appropriate for a transitional zone between the commercial
Yep.
and the R4 that would allow for a little higher density, maybe up to the 8 units per acre. And so unfortunately, we just don't have a zoning district yet
That's right.
that really fits in this.
Yep, and that was what I mentioned last time, is it really kind of, it puts people like Mr. Horn at a disadvantage, because he's only got a few choices, and the choices are all not very popular. So he doesn't have a lot of options, and so I think we just need to have kind of a community discussion about whether we want to provide other options beside the zoning districts that we have right now. And maybe we do, maybe we don't. It's really up to the community. But I think we need to have that conversation. And this is kind of just setting some, language and parameters for what that might look like and some of its characteristics in very broad terms, policy statement kind of terms.
Now, we got to remember, this is one piece of property. There may be
That's
others,
right.
and,
Well,
you know.
I think I think there's a product or a zoning district that yields a product that's desirable in multiple locations in the town of Farragut. And we've already determined that there is a desire and a need based in the land use plan for this medium density, 6 to 8 units an acre. We just don't have a zoning district that fits it.
That's right, yeah.
Well, on the low end, we do.
Yeah.
With the R4, right?
The missing
Okay, well, I can if you can send me that change, I'll update the medium density residential and have that ready. Well, I guess it is up for a vote now.
Right, that's what I was
If y'all
about to
are
ask.
comfortable
Are
with
we
me
ready
just
for that,
changing
or-
that language.
We need to hear from people.
Was there any, do you have any other cards of folks that
No,
want
that
to
was
speak?
it.
I gave to you, Mr. Cooper that was some of his.
Comments, okay.
The one comment that they did, that I got input from the residents, was they don't like the pictures that are currently included for medium density.
I think we
Well,
fixed
I
it.
took those out.
Yeah,
Because they're concerned.
Those are new pictures there.
you're thinking that it's
Well, that's
misleading.
what- Okay, well, the concern with I think the concern still with the lower one, I know that's a cottage style, but the concern is that it's looking tiny homish. And
Kind of what?
Come
tiny-
on.
tiny home, the small
I understand,
homes,
but
the tiny homes.
seriously, we're gonna start dictating that you now gotta have 1,500 square foot houses?
I'm just stating that there's a difference.
It looks like a summer camp to me. I mean, I'm not sure I
Yeah.
wanna live there, but it looks kinda cool.
They're not looking for 600 square foot homes. The little tiny, the tiny homes, that tiny.
Well, I think there's a demand for that as well, but, you know.
And replace that picture if y'all want, it doesn't matter, I just, to
just-
change it. Change the picture.
I don't know if tiny homes are economically feasible to
company
build.
housing development that went with the
Cost
mine
of
or-
property nowadays.
Well, I don't disagree with you.
Y'all want me to change that lower picture to something else? It doesn't matter to me,
I think
I would recommend changing it, Mark.
it comes across as
That's
the old worker homes in the.
I'll put something
the
in
mining
there.
development or something.
Okay.
Call them row houses.
Row houses, yeah, that's.
I think they're kinda cute, but, that's me.
Well, like I said at the workshop, I've been to a couple of these and
Yeah.
they're not cheap.
I do think, instead of us kicking the can down the road, we need to think about this zoning district. I think it's unfair to a landowner here in the town of Farragut, just to leave him in limbo about what may or may not happen in the future. There's a need for this, and it shouldn't be completely up to the applicant to have to spearhead a zoning district that there's a need for. And so again, this is not on the agenda tonight, but I think it needs to be on a soon future agenda.
Yep, I agree. Yep.
It's no use to have a land use plan that you can't have a regulation that implements it. It's kind of a non sequitur.
Talked about
I mean,
primarily at
that's
the
the crux
workshop.
of the whole thing.
That's exactly right.
May I approach?
Come on up to the lectern, sir.
A blue card, but
It's all right.
I've just prompted. I just have a question I'll approach.
Hey, Doug.
I'm George Cooper, 325 Bernie Circle. A suggestion, just really in the form of a question, when may we have maybe a community meeting to discuss this zoning district issue? and maybe even make it applicable to this particular property, when can we do that? Is that something that we could do soon? It would benefit all of us. It would benefit you, it would benefit Doug as a developer, and it would certainly benefit the community.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm sure the uncertainty tortures you as much as it does Mr. Horn. Because you don't know, you know.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
my
Thank
thought
you.
is that we would have a workshop and discuss this, and we may use Mr. Horn's property as the guinea pig, but we're not necessarily saying, hey, that we're designing and everything just for that. Because I think that's a different agenda item. And so what my thought is kind of like where we talked about the ball field lighting, is we loosely kind of talked about it at a particular location, but then generally we try to step back at 10,000 feet and say, okay, what are the other areas around the town where this could be applicable? That's what I would like to do with this new zoning district. And we can use his as a guinea pig and start because there's a lot of transitional elements that I think would work real well, because you've got some commercial and you've got some residential and you've got some higher residential and lower residential, around it. So I think it would be a pretty big kind of beta test for us as we kind of work through what maybe a future zoning ordinance would look like.
I have to speak up for the concerns I've heard from the community. When we put into place the S1, the senior living community, and we broke up that what was all medium density, we put a portion of property in between Baldwin and Park and Waverly Court that is now designated medium density, when neither Baldwin Park or Waverly Court is medium density. So their concern is that doesn't make any sense. That portion of the land use plan doesn't make any sense, given the existing density and given the existing residential nature there. And so they have concerns about the land use plan in that area to begin with. Now, we've had the residents come in and take a look and have a lot of input on Watt Road, and they were able to put their input in, and we changed Watt Road as a result of community input. And we did the same thing with McPhee Road, and they had a lot of input, and we changed the land use plan for them. And the residents in that area are expecting that they have the same opportunity to come in and take a look at that land use plan in that area and have some input into what's going on now. It has changed significantly since 2012. In just that, we've put in the senior living, but also that those lots on the other side of Bourne Road have subdivided into large lots. So the community in that area has concerns. And that's, they would like their opportunity for some input into the land use plan in an area that's impacting them as well.
But
That's what
Louise,
George is asking for.
Let me point out, Louise, the land use plan, of course, you use that as a landowner, as a person that's borrowed money, put equity in projects. You look at the plan as to what a town, whether it's Farragut or any other town, their idea about a property. This property had the land use for medium density residential till 2012 at 9 to 6 to 12, then it went to 6 to 8. The land use plan has always been that way. That's what we've always planned for and worked toward. So we're not interested in, any community that you mentioned, whether it be, we developed Waverly Court. We did. I think it's 4.5 units per acre. We developed that. We're not interested in lowering the density. We're happy to work with the type and the scale and the footprint and all that, but we're not interested in changing the density. I don't think that's fair, because we've had two land use plans, 2012 to 18, that was 6 to 12, now it's 6 to 8. So I'm sure, by the way, when Baldwin Park, we got outbid by $25,000 for the old Stooksbury land at Baldwin Park. And at the time, I was the adjacent landowner, and I didn't want it to be R3. I wanted it to be lower density. But change happened, growth happened, and so that became Baldwin Park, which is a very nice development. But we're not interested in, or think it would be consistent and fair as somebody mentioned tonight, to change the density again. I'm sure some of the homeowners would like to go, R3 on all our property, but we don't think that's reasonable because of your land use plan.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but this is a planning commission. We have, by statutory authority, we have actually have the duty to adopt an official general plan. But we also, it states, the commission may from time to time amend, extend, or add to the plan or carry any part of subject matter into greater detail. It seems to me, and I understand your point of view, but you're zoned R1. You could come in tomorrow with a plan for R1, and we would all move along with our day because
Well,
you
we,
have.
of course, wouldn't do that.
But you have property rights tied into the zoning. The land use plan is made to be adopted and amended. And
Right.
we've been amending the plan, and residents have been able to come in and have impact and say on the plan in other areas.
But there are a lot of residences you don't hear from. You may hear from a few that are right around the property, but there's a lot of people that want some more of this housing, like Noah's talking about, that you don't hear from. You can't please all the people all the time, and there's just a few people may have commented to you, but we get a lot of comments of people wanting more diverse housing for Farragut, and that's what we're trying to do. But
Well,
we wouldn't.
and I don't disagree with you. I agree wholeheartedly with that statement. I agree with what Noah's saying here. I said it in our planning at the beginning of the year when we did our budget planning, that this is something that we need to tackle because you can't have a use and not have a zoning ordinance to go with it. But if you bring something in and the residents that are directly impacted by it raise holy heck again, that we're going to continue to go down this road. We've got to address that particular issue in between those two neighborhoods. It makes absolutely no sense that you would go from R4 to a higher density back to a lower density in that area on Bourne Road. It's.
Of course, you're right behind a shopping center we built years ago, and then Engle built the bigger.
I'm not talking about the whole property.
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to jump here. In all due respect to Louise and Mr. Horn, this is not an agenda item tonight.
No, it's not.
And this is really,
But it's-
we don't have residents' input. I do foresee it as an agenda item in the future. And then, we can deal with changes. But I think what we have on the agenda, it's also almost my bedtime.
Okay.
We've got some changes to the medium density residential as well as the high density residential. And I'd like to make a motion to approve with a couple of changes that Louise suggested
And
that
I'll
has
get
to
to-
do with the words less desirable and marketable.
Yes.
I'll second.
Favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Horn, thank you all for paying attention to what the people of the town of Farragut wanted.
Yes, ma'am. We always do. Our newspaper always does too.
Number 8, discussion and a public hearing on amendment to the penalty section of Chapter 113, tree protection for the town Farragut Municipal Code to increase penalties for removal of protected trees without permission.
I don't know. Okay.
Let's give them a minute here to get this
All right.
wording
I'll
squared
take a look
away.
at it. Yeah, we talked about this last month as a workshop item, and this basically would be an amendment to our tree protection ordinance to strengthen the penalty for unapproved removal of protected trees. And we have protected trees that are defined in our tree protection ordinance. And this would basically increase the replacement requirement from 1 caliper per caliper inch removed to 4 calipers per caliper inch removed. So it's a pretty substantial change to that. So we put together the ordinance. It was pretty much the same language that we presented at the workshop session that everybody seemed to be okay with. We do need to run this through the town attorney and make sure he's okay with it before, if you all are okay with the recommendation, before we take it through to the Board of Mayor and Alderman. Make sure Tom gives it a look over. Might need to clean it up a little bit.
Yes. I'm out. See ya.
Other than that, we do recommend approval of Resolution PC-21-13, which would recommend approval of Ordinance 21-16 with the stipulation that we will be taking this through the town attorney and making sure that he tweaks it if he needs to, and before it goes to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, if you all are okay with that.
I'm going to move for approval.
Second.
Subject to the
To the
approval?
stipulation?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is some language in here that needs to be changed.
Okay.
That's
Who
already
seconded
in the
that?
markup.
Ed? Oh, the mayor.
Or
St.
Ed,
Clair.
either one. I think they were right there at the buzzer.
In unison.
Yeah.
A chorus.
That's good. Okay.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of utilities?
On utilities,
Oh,
we have one on citizen forum.
okay.
The citizen forum is Christine Orvega? Orvega. Okay.
Okay, so my true purpose here, and I'll make it short, is that I understand, and I'm just going to state that I understand that business and tax and revenue and property values and amenities are what drive Farragut and make it successful. I also know we're talking about going even more land use and getting multifamily and more people into our town, 900 additional this year or last year or whatever it was, 18 months. But if anybody has tried to go down to that school, I have 3 kids. One is graduated. I've been through every single school system from the primary on up. I have 2 high schoolers. It is a disaster, and I'm sorry, it is a safety hazard. I went to pick up my freshman, and this was after I did read the posts on the Farragut Moms in which we had some participation from here that said, oh, it's going to get better, but I go down to pick him up, and I see half of the Kroger parking lot was blocked off. You had kids walking across streets all the way over to PetSmart. They're up and down both sides of that road, which we all know is not safe. And I feel like we really need to address the ins and outs of that school. If you're going to keep adding more people to it, we need to talk about flow. And then we also, I know that we're not totally against moving businesses. If you think about where the baseball field is, and we're doing more construction in there, and now they're putting the softball, whatever field house in, so now there's even less places for cars, kids, pickups. If we could start thinking about moving some of those business out of West End into those buildings that we've just repurposed, we've upgraded, and start pushing them towards the new building that you're doing across the way and the old Kroger parking lot and so on and so forth, can we please start opening up some space for the school? Before COVID and virtual, I had a sophomore and an 8th grader, and I was told she wasn't even going to be able to park in the parking lot. She would have to park far away, because we didn't have enough parking for our students. The parents can't do safe pickups from the track, the football field, now the baseball and softball as well, because people are parked on on top of the, the sidewalk. They're parked in the grass, they're parked everywhere, and people are jammed up. We're just creating accident zones, especially at that turn lane, going into the intermediate and the middle and the high school all at the same time. If we could reroute some buses on that back street to go in the back side of the schools, and I know it doesn't exist today, but rethinking some ins and outs and getting some flow in there, it would be very helpful. My kids took over 50 minutes to get out of the high school parking lot for almost 3 weeks. I think that's crazy. If we're going to keep talking about land use and putting more and more people in Farragut, think about flow and safety and the fact that our kids do need, not all of them can take an Uber, not all of them can walk. Yes, they can take a bus, but even the buses were getting jammed up and late. So let's think about the flow in there, and let's really start talking about expanding some room in there for the high school, the middle school, and the intermediate primarily, because I just think it's crazy up there, and it's unsafe at this point.
Christine, this has to go to Knox County Schools.
So
It
that's not
has
our
to.
responsibility.
It does, and I agree, but I think there's also
Give me a
areas
chance.
here.
Give me a chance, please. They did a recent study to expand Farragut Intermediate and Farragut Primary, and wisely said, we're not doing that. They can't handle the parking. But in that study, which you can find online, they have a new flow for a new ability for stacking to bring kids around. This has to be handled. Knox County Schools it's an on-property stacking issue. I will say this. We are trying to work on pedestrian safety. The goal is to have a pedestrian-oriented town center where people are walking. I get it, Kingston Pike is a nightmare, and the people travel way too fast. Congestion is actually your friend when you're trying to deal with pedestrian safety, because people are moving much slower, and the kids are getting where they need to go. But I agree that there's a flow, that once this new development is built, we've got to look at how, ultimately, the nirvana, I've said this to people, is trying to get our kids so that they can walk and ride their bikes to school. How do we accomplish that? How do we, as a community who's invested so much in sidewalks and bike trails, accomplish it so that our kids can get to school safely without having to get in a car? Because that's part of our issue. But the flow on campus is a big part of the issue. They put that divider in between the bus loop and the parent loop, and it jammed everything up because people stop on that loop to let their kids out. And of course, the bus part, they used to all merge in together. Of course,
agreed.
It wasn't very safe.
But I think the other thing is West End. We got to stop developing West End area. We've got to open some of that up to parking and be realistic. We're in the suburbs. I have 3 cars in my parking lot. I'm probably going to add a 4th. I've got people driving, kids that got work. I've got to go to work. My husband, they've got sports. So let's be realistic. Cars are going to be the way most of them get there. We need to create places for the parents to park when they want to go to stuff. And West End, as we develop more and more, and we just keep adding more businesses and more stuff and piling everybody on, we should be opening some of that West End area up and pushing people out of there and making it more parking or throughways to pick kids up from the tracks and area and get parents out of the flow of the school over there and out of the way. Football games, I won't even go into that at night. This is the kind of stuff that...
That's a privately owned commercial property. It's not.
Push them out.
No, but at the same time, we've moved people around and taken buildings down like we did with the old Kroger. We moved that music lessons place up, and I'm saying...
Private development
But
as
we've
well.
moved people around in the town to help out with some of the things, and I just think we need to look at that.
But those are all private developments. We don't own
We
that
didn't
property.
move the music folks. I mean, that's a lease between the owner and the tenant, and them determining what's best for their business and their property. But that's not coming from the town of Farragut.
Okay, but that's what I'm asking, is the town of Farragut to look at some of those areas that sit on top of our school and think about how we can also help there as well. And I know we just keep building more businesses, more houses, more everything, but there's no room for the people and the stuff and like the movement of those people. And so I would just ask that we start looking at that as we think about planning.
There's 2 pieces of property for sale that the school board could purchase, but they have
live in
not
Farragut.
stepped up. I know, it'd have to be the school board. We
would
can't
have to
buy
be.
and put private parking lots in we can't do that. That's the school board.
And the other issue is something people don't, a lot of us don't understand. They don't build schools proactively. They build them reactively. And they wait till they fill up. See, and we're getting a new elementary school. That's going to relieve both primary and intermediate, as far as, especially primary, is if they can get rid of the trailers and get these kids into classrooms, that's going to relieve the parking issue. It's going to relieve the traffic issue. Same with Farragut Intermediate. Now, middle school and high school are crowded, and they will become more crowded because Knox County Schools is going to wait till they have enough kids in enough of the middle schools that if they build another one, they can have 80% full. So that's part of the growing pains, and it's not just in Farragut. We've got growth coming in Choteau. We've got growth in Hardin Valley, which is what's putting the pressure on us for primary and intermediate. So this is that kind of issue, but we're also seeing a lot of growth out in Loudoun County that is feeding through Farragut because we are the path of least resistance. So the frustration, because I hear you, I understand. We've got 3,500 kids in 2 schools that people are all arriving at the same time to drop them off and all arriving at the same time to take them home. That can't help but be a mess. You cannot put 3,500 kids on one campus at one time and think that it's not going to be an ordeal to get them in and out. So,
And part of this
Somebody does.
is, part of this is the culture we've evolved to. You know, in this area, we have, every kid has to have a car to drive to school in high school. Every parent
nobody
driving a kid, nobody, that's what my next
nobody
comment,
carpools.
nobody carpools.
I don't think that many
And
kids even
the
ride
idea
the bus
that-
anymore.
I mean, there's just, you know,
They
we have a
do.
culture that.
I rode the bus when I
jams
was a
the
kid,
system.
but
there's kids riding the bus. The problem is they're low on bus drivers.
On buses and drivers.
So the kids are sitting on the floor, and so if I were a parent and knew my kid was sitting on the floor, I'd say, you know what, until they can solve the bus problem, I'll be driving you. But that's the issue, is the buses are overcrowded, there's a whole bunch of, it's just
It's
a big,
multidimensional.
big mess that is very hard to untie. But as a town, we don't own the property around it. These are all privately owned. That's a private development. The Builder property is a private development. Certainly, we have the zoning and the planning and the requirement to make sure that they're jumping through all the hoops that we want to, but we don't own that property. So that's to me, a good place to start is with Knox County Schools, but you got to talk to Susan Horn.
I was going to say, but even if you go to Knox County Schools, where do they expand? Because West End sits right on top of literally the perimeter of our school, to the point where the businesses are backing into fields and we're literally overlooking. So that's why I'm saying, if we don't start, and I know the town has purchased property, within the Farragut and has developed it or has done stuff with it. So there's opportunity for us to relook at West End and actually think about how we can help actually encourage people to want to go to that school, the parents to be able to get in there, the kids to be able to get in there. And you're in the suburbs, so I don't think you're going to change the culture of the cars, because you have an affluent environment here. We all work, we've got things to do, our kids can take a car, they can get where they need to be. I just think that that's unrealistic, but I think the town has to start thinking about it too, because I know we can say those are private, but at the same time, why wouldn't we have that, again, community discussion about what does it really look like to make everybody's life valuable and everybody's life more efficient, and make it for everybody and not just, keep putting more businesses up and we're just gonna overcrowd everybody to the point where people don't wanna live here. And that's what my fear is. Because I really like that there's stuff there, but we're just compacting constantly. And now we're gonna put more businesses across the way and take up more parking space and more stuff that kids were already using.
Well,
I think you're just gonna.
With the kids and the parking, they really weren't supposed to be parking
That's
there.
private property.
They were not
I
supposed to
get
be
it,
parking.
but
they
when
did
you
it, but
have
they
kids
weren't
that were told they
supposed to.
couldn't park, and then they're driving into school, and where do you overflow? I mean, they've been cheap parking all through West End and over there,
Yeah,
but
that was not, they were not supposed to, it's been a long time since my kids have been in school, and even back in those days, they would find notes on their cars saying, do not park here, this is private property. And so the fact that I'm relieved that they closed all of that off, because I sure wouldn't want my kids parking in that area where they're got construction going on.
Okay.
And so.
I think it's
and
unrealistic.
construction-
You have to go down there and have kids down there to understand what's going on, and I'm
Well,
sorry, but I had
I go
3,
down there.
I got 2 more, and this is just, it's out of control now. And like I said, I saw kids all over the street, all over the sides of Kingston. It is unsafe, and we should really address it as a community. And it's not just the school board, and we already know the school board, Farragut is probably priority, and I'm not even gonna be mean, but it's probably at the bottom of the priorities every time. And every time I've gone down to that school about anything, it's been, well, we'll talk to the parents, So I'm not gonna go to the school board for something where they have nowhere to go anyway. We've literally used every piece of property down there. Where are they gonna build? So that's something that I think we as Farragut have to address.
You also have to admit that that's a utilization of property. They have a whole lower part
great.
of that parking lot is used for the band. That's a parking lot.
No, they do. They
So-
park during the day though, and then the kids all leave or move,
Yeah.
and then they use it. Agreed. And cross
So,
country's
and
over there.
Yeah, so, It's
I agreed. I'm just
frustrating.
saying, I think it's something the community has to think about, because the school board can't build where there is no space. We are literally getting to a point where we're using every ounce of space. So I
Really,
just think it's something we have to
The best
address.
solution would be for a new high school and a new middle school somewhere in the southwest part of the county to take pressure off of Farragut. It actually worked when Hardin Valley was built.
Yeah.
A lot of pressure was taken off of all the three schools that you're talking about. And then what's happened is Hardin Valley has got to capacity again.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you're seeing some of these kids that were zoned originally for Hardin Valley, they're getting zoned back to Farragut. So, and Farragut's growing as well. And so we're kind of back to where we were 10 years ago
We're getting
when
there
Hardin
again.
Valley, because it actually, for a few years, it actually was real comfortable for a period of time because, 20 or 30% of all the kids from Farragut all went to Hardin Valley.
Understood, but you're talking about putting in higher and medium density now. So now you're actually compounding the problem, and yet we have no way to expand those ins and outs of that school right now. There's nowhere to put another road or nowhere to put another parking
Amazingly,
lot.
the medium density, higher density really put very few kids into the schools. They're empty nesters, they're young couples. It's the single-family developments. It's the big neighborhoods, big subdivisions that really are the users. But we're not going to get
Anyway.
into that.
So-
We agree there is a problem. I live on Concord Road. I understand. I deal with the traffic on Concord Road. It's a mess, especially if you're trying to go anywhere from 7:30 to about 8:20. It's a nightmare.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I've had 2 kids go through school.
Let's see, so we have no utilities, and
Motion to adjourn.
the September the 16th, 2021, I had to look to see the date. A meeting is adjourned. 3/4, well, more than 3/4 of the time, I have no idea.